Chapter 392. Let's Wrestle. Accompanied by a burst of unusually happy laughter, a seemingly weak arm extended towards Wu Ming. However, this arm gave Wu Ming a very dangerous feeling. If I'm caught by this arm, I'll be finished even if I don't die? Wu Ming was shocked. In an instant, the blonde lady grabbed Wu Ming and fiercely threw Wu Ming over her shoulder. Boom! Wu Ming's body slammed into the ground. The ground around Wu Ming cracked and made a loud noise. Ah, it's a substitute. The blonde lady let go of Wu Ming, who had fallen to the ground. Then Wu Ming, who had been thrown to the ground by the blonde lady, changed. At a speed visible to the naked eye, Wu Ming's body turned into wood. Using his clothes as a medium, Wu Ming successfully escaped Quizzer's fatal fall. I don't dare to be caught by that move of yours. Even if my durability is B grade, I wouldn't dare to try. At this time, Wu Ming's voice came from behind the blonde lady. After all, it would be troublesome if he died. The blonde lady turned her head and saw Wu Ming standing not far away, unharmed. His upper body was naked. Oh, you've taken off all your clothes as soon as we meet. It really makes me a little embarrassed. The blonde lady said happily without any embarrassment. Because the density of magic in the dense forest was too high, and the blonde lady was too fast, Wu Ming did not notice her approach until he saw her. Now, Wu Ming looked seriously at the blonde lady who was exposed in front of him. Wu Ming felt a high level of divinity from her. In this case, presumably, this goddess was not lying. With such a high level of divinity, no one could impersonate her except a god of the main god level. She was probably the Quetzalcoatl. You must be the feathered serpent god. Wu Ming did not beat around the bush. That's right, big sister, I am the Quetzalcoatl. You can call me Quetzalcoatl, the Uruk Hyunryong. Quetzalcoatl smiled at Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming was a little surprised by the feathered serpent god's gender, he could still accept it. After all, there were so many examples. It seems that the pterosaurs outside the rainforest were controlled by you. Coupled with the greeting gift just now, it really surprised me. Wu Ming said with a smile. After all, I don't really want to see you, Uruk Hyunryong. In an instant, Quizzer's face looked as if she had put on a performance that transcended the horizon. She was abnormally terrified. Looking at Quetzalcoatl, who looked more like an evil god than a good god, Wu Ming was very calm. I want to know about the three goddesses' alliance and your respective goals. That's why I'm here. Wu Ming acted as if he did not see Quetzalcoatl's performance and asked directly. Also, the residents of Idu told me that a man is offered as a sacrifice to you every day. I want to know what's going on. However, Quetzalcoatl smiled. Didn't I say, Uruk Hyunryong, I don't welcome your arrival? If you leave now, I can let bygones be bygones. But if you continue to stay, I'll have to use my super wrestling skills. Quetzalcoatl's smile reached her ears as she looked at Wu Ming with an abnormally terrifying expression. I understand. Wu Ming closed his eyes, looking as if he had understood. Wu Ming opened his eyes abruptly and said seriously, then let's have a fight. The winner will listen to the loser. Whether it's killing, trampling, enslaving, or toying with the loser, it's all up to you. How about it? Oh, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I accept, big sister. Quetzalcoatl instantly cancelled her performance and reverted to her loving big sister appearance, agreeing to Wu Ming's suggestion. Then, in less than a few seconds, Quetzalcoatl used her performance again and smiled maliciously at Wu Ming. In that case, you'd better be prepared to die, Hyunryong. Then, as if he had achieved his goal, Wu Ming's lips curled up into a smile. With this, the contract is established. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, the sound of chains could be heard. Clatter? What? The shimmering golden chains wrapped around Quetzalcoatl, causing her to cry out in surprise. Quetzalcoatl looked at the center of the cracked ground behind her. The pristine white robe seemed to be worn by an invisible person, hovering above the ground like a ghost. Several chains shot out from the robe and extended to Quetzalcoatl's body. The chains that bound Quetzalcoatl came from this robe. Without a doubt, this was the doing of her enemy, Hyunryong. You bastard! How dare you sneak attack me? Quizzard glared at Wu Ming as if she was being treated unfairly. Little did she know that she was the one who had started the sneak attack. I've already said that the contract is established. From then on, our battle will begin. Why is Lord Quetzalcoatl going back on your word? Wu Ming crossed his arms and looked at Quetzalcoatl with a smile. You despicable bastard. Watch me break these chains. Quetzalcoatl displayed her irritable yen-yi and said rather angrily. Then she began to struggle in vain. By the way, let me tell you something. As long as you're a god, you can forget about breaking free after being bound by this chain. Even if Tiamat came, she wouldn't be able to break free either, Wu Ming said rather arrogantly. Quetzalcoatl ignored Wu Ming and struggled to break free of the chains. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could not break free from the shackles of the golden chains. That was not all. Quetzalcoatl found that her magical power, divine power, and other powers were all bound by these golden chains and could not be used at all. Damn it! Where the hell did you get these chains from? Not only can I not break free, but my powers are also sealed. Even the Enkidu isn't this perverted. Quetzalcoatl gave up on struggling and said irritably, "What? You're not going to struggle anymore?" Wu Ming laughed. Of course, Quetzalcoatl could not break free of the Enkidu. The Enkidu was something used to control the god of law, so it was impossible for Quetzalcoatl, who had extremely high divinity, to break free. If it was the original version of Enkidu, Quasar would still be able to break free from the shackles of Enkidu by relying on his own attributes, but only by a little. Her strength had not reached A rank, so it was impossible for her to break free of the Enkidu's shackles through pure strength. Moreover, Wu Ming's Enkidu was the manifestation of the Enkidu that was attached to the main body of the great origin, Wu Ming. Once a god like Quetzalcoatl was trapped by the Enkidu that was no longer what it used to be. With the current Enkidu's ability, even Tiamat would not be able to do anything about it. I failed. I admit defeat. You win. Can you let go of me now? Quetzalcoatl removed her facial expression and revealed the look of a big sister again. She smiled gently and looked at Wu Ming. And so, the battle between Hyunryong and the Feathered Serpent God ended with Hyunryong insta-killing the Feathered Serpent God. After hearing Quetzalcoatl admit defeat, Wu Ming released the shackles of the Enkidu on Quetzalcoatl. Then let's start with the questions. Chapter 393. Wu Ming was not worried that Quetzalcoatl would go back on her word, because the agreement between Wu Ming and Quasar would be upheld by the world. Most importantly, this was the end of the gods' era, and both Wu Ming and Quasar were gods, so there was no need for them to sign any contract. They only needed to make a verbal agreement. Both Quasar and Wu Ming were well aware of this, so Quasar directly admitted defeat and let Wu Ming untie. Wu Ming did not hesitate in the slightest. So, what do you want to ask? Quasar asked casually. Quasar, who had become Wu Ming's slave, was not worried that Wu Ming would do anything to her. She looked very relaxed. Then let's talk about the disappearance of men in Aidu first. After all, if Quasar was really the Feathered Serpent God, then the disappearance of men would become a point of suspicion. After all, the Feathered Serpent God hated living sacrifices. They, of course, are wrestling with me, Quasar said matter-of-factly. Because none of them can take a single hit from me, I chose to have the residents of Aidu sacrifice a man every day. They are all resting in my temple now, and when they have recovered, they will wrestle with me. Quasar looked rather distressed that no one was wrestling with her. Ugh. Wu Ming did not expect that Quasar would ask the residents of Aidu to sacrifice a man every day just to have someone to wrestle with. Although Wu Ming did not know much about wrestling, Quasar seemed to have used wrestling techniques when she attacked Wu Ming at the beginning. How much did she like wrestling? Wu Ming remembered that the Feathered Serpent God did not seem to have any wrestling attributes. How did her hobby of wrestling come to be? Seriously, it's rare that you don't fall but you can't live on? Wu Ming helplessly covered his face. Of course. Wrestling is a religion. If possible, I want to become the god of wrestling. Quasar did not have the slightest bit of self-awareness. Instead, he wanted to become the god of wrestling. Next question. What is your relationship with the mother of magical beasts in the north, Tiamat? Wu Ming asked. After all, one of the two pillar goddesses was in the south and the other was in the north. One was waging a war against the magical beasts, while the other was secretly expanding her territory. Wu Ming didn't believe that the two of them had nothing to do with each other. How could it be so coincidental that they were doing it at the same time? You've really hit the nail on the head. Quasar smiled in surprise. I'm in an alliance with them, Quasar said. After a while, Quasar told Wu Ming everything. The mastermind had set up the Holy Grail at this singularity and used it as a medium to summon himself and Tiamat in the north. He left a message that whoever obtained the Uruk's Holy Grail first would become the new goddess of this era and control the fate of this era. Therefore, the two pillar goddesses competed separately. Tiamat started from the north, while Quasar started from the south. One kept producing magical beasts, crushing the northern cities with their numbers and pushing towards the south. The other relied on the concealment of the dense forest and the rapid and fatal attacks of the magical beasts in the north as cover. Quasar slowly expanded towards the north. The goal of the two pillar goddesses was the Uruk in the middle of Mesopotamia because the holy grail they were fighting for was in Gilgamesh's hands. However, compared to Tiamat, who was producing magical beasts and killing humans, Quizhar was much milder. After all, I still quite like humans. This was Quizhar's statement. The protection that Quizhar mentioned was true. She loved humans from the bottom of her heart. Therefore, her method was to occupy the Uruk and obtain the Holy Grail from Gilgamesh to become the new goddess of this era. Therefore, with the protection of the pterosaur, no humans in Quizhar's territory were killed by magical beasts that came out of nowhere. This was especially so for wrestling. Although those who wrestled with Quizhar were covered in wounds, they did not die. Moreover, Quizhar would provide them with treatment and water to survive. Other than exchanging a few blows with Quizhar every day, the rest of the time was quite comfortable. At the very least, their lives were not in danger. Why do I feel like a gigolo? Wuming complained in his heart. Tiamat and Quizhar established an alliance to conquer the Uruk together. At the same time, they also established a contract. No one was to hinder the other, attack the other, or harm the other. Once this contract was broken, one would receive a backlash from the world. It could be said that the damage would be doubled for those of the same level. Perhaps, the moment before they attacked, they would be killed by the heavenly punishment of breaking the oath. However, a new goddess appeared not long ago, Quizhar said. The new goddess also knew that she would become the goddess of the new era if she obtained the Holy Grail. Therefore, she also wanted to cooperate with Tiamat and Quizhar and join their alliance. However, in reality, although it was called cooperation and joining the alliance, it was actually just joining a contract with the other goddesses not to harm each other. After all, it would be terrible if Tiamat and Quizhar joined forces to deal with her. Because this goddess was the last to join, and because of her uniqueness, she was not assigned any offensive tasks. Instead, she was in a standby state. In other words, the three goddesses are in an alliance. Wuming pondered over Quizhar's words. He did not suspect that Quizhar was lying. She could not lie because of the restrictions of the contract. That's right. It's the situation of the three goddesses fighting for themselves in the alliance. Quizhar smiled. So, who is the third goddess? Wuming asked. After all, the contents of the three goddesses' contract did not state that they could not disclose information about the other goddesses. Therefore, it was fine for Quizhar to reveal information to Wuming. It's the native goddess of Mesopotamia, the mistress of the underworld, Ereshkigal. Quizhar said the goddess' name. It's her? Wuming was a little shocked. Wuming finally understood why the third goddess was not assigned an offensive task. Ereshkigal was born to manage the underworld. No god liked to manage it, and she could not leave the underworld for the rest of her life. She could only stay in the underworld. Therefore, Ereshkigal could not attack the Uruk on land. However, because Ereshkigal could not leave the shackles of the underworld, she had more powerful authority. Even if she was in the underworld, she was invincible. No god or human who came to the underworld could resist her. Even if she could not be on land, Ereshkigal could still operate from below the city. She could pull the souls of humans on the ground into the underworld in an instant. This created a terrifying scene. The bodies of humans were cold in their sleep, and the entire city became a ghost town. This is really useful information. Wuming nodded. This trip was not a waste. Since you have no intention of killing humans, how about we stop here? Wuming looked at Quizhar. If he could solve the problem of Quizhar before she was in danger, Wuming's trip from the Uruk to the extreme south was not in vain. Chapter 394. Apart from that, Wuming had another idea. After all, Quizhar was also a goddess. Even if she could not attack the other pillar goddesses, she could still keep the other goddesses in check. She could also deal with the magical beast. After all, Quizhar was already doing that. She was protecting the people in her territory from the magical beasts. After all, the restriction of the contract was that he could not attack the goddess. Therefore, Wuming wanted to rope Quizhar into his side. Wuming believed that with Quizhar's addition, the Uruk side would be like a tiger that had grown wings. Even if it did not work, it would be fine as long as Quizhar did not expand her territory and attack the Uruk. Sure, Quizhar said with a smile. You agreed so decisively? Wuming was a little surprised. After all, I was defeated. Even if it was a sneak attack, I would still admit defeat. That's what it means to be inferior. Looking at Quizhar like this, Wuming could not help but think of the legend of the feathered serpent god. Due to being drunk by other gods with ulterior motives, the country under her rule was ruined by the other gods. After the feathered serpent god woke up, she blamed herself for her mistake and decided to leave this place to reflect on herself. In other words, the feathered serpent god was a god who accepted defeat and admitted defeat. Judging from this point, the feathered serpent god was really a good god. However, in the eyes of humans she was still a strange god. If you want to contribute a man every day you should make it clear. If it's just wrestling it's not a big deal. You can also let them go home. They can come over and wrestle with you every day. You can also hold a wrestling tournament and train these people who don't know how to wrestle. That's too unbecoming of a goddess, Quizhar responded to Wu-Ming with a smile. In that case let these men go. I'll ask King Gilgamesh. You can hold a wrestling tournament and train these people to wrestle. I'll show them to you. For people who loved wrestling, it was good to be able to watch an exciting wrestling competition. Yes, you win. You have the final say. Quizhar waved her hand, indicating that she agreed with Wu-Ming's words. Wu-Ming looked at the regretful Quizhar and pondered for a moment before speaking. If it's wrestling I can actually play along with you. After all, it's more interesting if the opponent is a god of the same level, isn't it? Wu-Ming smiled. After all, Wu-Ming and Quizhar had only exchanged a few blows before Quizhar was bound by Wu-Ming's Enkidu. There was no fight at all. It wasn't just Quizhar. In fact, Wu-Ming also felt rather regretful. His opponent was the legendary feathered serpent god. If he didn't fight he would be letting down this fated encounter. Really? Good. Let's wrestle first. Quizhar was overjoyed and rushed towards Wu-Ming. Hey, wait. I'm not talking about now. Come. I'll be very gentle. Dong? Wu-Ming walked out of the temple's jungle strangely. Fanbaba, who was waiting outside, was lying there obediently. Woo-woo, seeing Wu-Ming come out, Fanbaba cried out in joy. She sat up and rubbed her upper body against Wu-Ming. Yo Fanbaba. Wu-Ming greeted Fanbaba, who was once again rubbing against him enthusiastically. However, Wu-Ming's movements were slightly stiff. Woo-woo? Fanbaba tilted her head in confusion. It's okay, I've already solved the feathered serpent god's problem. It's just that I was chatting with the feathered serpent god just now and she was a little excited. Wu-Ming said with a fake smile. Thinking of Wu-Ming just now, Wu-Ming felt helpless. Because he had aroused Quizhar's fighting spirit, no matter how Wu-Ming persuaded her, she couldn't calm down. Therefore Wu-Ming fought with Quizhar. Then it turned out that Wu-Ming really didn't know how to wrestle and was repeatedly thrown by Quizhar. Wu-Ming always felt that this was Quizhar's revenge for him using Enkidu to plot against Quizhar. She didn't show any mercy at all. Fortunately, Wu-Ming's own martial arts skills were good. After learning Quizhar's wrestling skills, he successfully made a scene with Quizhar. As a result, the jungle and even the land around the temple seemed to have been ravaged by a storm. Ah, what a good fall. I didn't even dare to use my strength against a human. Indeed, it's more comfortable to fall against a god of the same level. This was Quizhar's face full of joy after the incident. In that case, I'll go make arrangements for the pterosaur first. I'll send all the men in my temple back to Eric Metropolis. Then Quizhar entered the temple and Wu-Ming walked out. Wu-Ming smiled at Fanbaba and touched his lower back. This guy really can't be merciful. Ouch. Wu-Ming touched his lower back that was injured by Quizhar's fall and said with some pain in his heart. By the way, where did the leopard man go? After all, Wu-Ming had initially left the leopard man to Fanbaba to deal with. Now Fanbaba was lying here and resting comfortably. Then where did the leopard man go? Woo-woo, Fanbaba indicated that he didn't slack off and then pointed to his butt with his head. Then Fanbaba lifted his butt and left this position. Then what appeared in front of Wu-Ming was a long cylindrical object that was constantly squirming. It seemed to be a person entangled in vines. After squirming twice and feeling that the thing pressing down on him was gone, a head popped out from the long cylindrical vine. Unsurprisingly, this was the leopard man's head with the jacket. The person in the vine was the leopard man. Damn it. How dare you press the honorable leopard man under your butt? I don't think I'll forgive you. The leopard man, who only had his head exposed, roared frantically and kept squirming his body that was tied in the vines. He looked like he would rather die than submit. Looking at the leopard man like this, Wu-Ming remembered what Quizhar said. When Wu-Ming wrestled with Quizhar, he asked her what was the relationship between the leopard man and her. Ah, that leopard, you can play with him as you wish, just don't kill him, Quizhar said with a smile. When he thought of Quizhar's words, Wu-Ming wanted to laugh. This leopard is really pitiful. Then Wu-Ming had the heart to tease the leopard. Did you know? Quetzalcoatl told me that your meat is of the highest quality among the gods. As a friendly meeting between us two gods, she gave you to me. Wu-Ming squatted down and looked at the leopard man, who was in a daze. Eh? In other words, you're my slave. By the way, I haven't eaten the meat of a god before. I'm in for a treat today. Wu Ming looked at the leopard man with a smile, but this smile looked like the smile of a demon no matter how you looked at it. How is that possible? How could Cooker betray me? You must be lying. The leopard man said, somewhat shaken. Oh, is that so? Then do you need me to prove it to you personally? With that, Wu Ming stood up, and then a flame and a knife appeared in his hand, as if he was really going to cook the leopard man. Wu Ming looked down at the leopard man condescendingly. Wait a minute. Don't eat me, my meat isn't delicious at all. The leopard man's face was pale, and he was so scared that his eyes rolled back. That's not up to you. Help. Cooker. Chapter 395. Wu Ming and Fanbaba left Aidu. Wu Ming told the residents of Aidu the truth and promised that the Quetzalcoatl god would return the males who were sacrificed as sacrifices. He also promised that the residents of Aidu would be able to go out and interact with other cities. However, in exchange for their protection, a wrestling tournament would be held every once in a while. Naturally, the residents of Eidolon agreed wholeheartedly. If they could obtain the protection of a god just by doing this, it would be a win-win situation. Now the residents of Aidu were relieved. After all, even if they were safe, it was still quite uncomfortable to not be able to rest in peace. Wu Ming also warned Quetzalcoatl not to continue spreading the jungle. Thus, Uar City, which was supposed to be Wu Ming's next target, was not swallowed by Quetzalcoatl's jungle. If possible, he also hoped that Quetzalcoatl would send out the pterosaur to eliminate the lone magical beast that somehow came to the south. Quetzalcoatl naturally agreed. After that, Wu Ming and Fanbaba began their journey back to Uruk. At the same time, Wu Ming also told the mayor of Uar City about the feathered serpent god. After that, because Wu Ming slightly neglected Fanbaba and the magical beast's attacks in the north were not that strong, Wu Ming decided to ride on Fanbaba and have a good chat with Fanbaba before returning to Uruk. Because of the journey, Wu Ming and Fanbaba arrived at the wilderness near the Persian Gulf. It was now nighttime. Wu Ming sat in front of a fire. A pot floated above the fire. Wu Ming leaned against Fanbaba's huge and soft body and drank a bowl of meat soup with a satisfied expression. Not far from him was the corpse of a magical beast. It was a magical beast that Wu Ming encountered along the way. It was ambushing passers-by and was killed by Wu Ming and made into meat soup. After all, no one said that magical beasts could not be made into food. ***. I'm starting to miss that adventure. Wu Ming held a bowl of broth and recalled the days when he had just returned from the demonic realm, where he had learned from Skaha and was training alone outside. During that period of time, Wu Ming was like a chivalrous hero. When he was tired, he would use the sky as his blanket and the earth as his bed. When he was hungry, he would pick wild fruits and hunt animals. When he was thirsty, he would drink spring water or dew before heading to Connaught. In Wu Ming's eyes, Skaha was more like a teacher than a warrior. Not only did he teach Wu Ming combat and magic, but he also taught Wu Ming some principles of being a human being and all kinds of small knowledge. After all, Wu Ming was an old lady who had lived for a long time. Queen. Naturally, she knew a lot after living for a long time. In addition, Skaha saw Wu Ming as his younger brother, so she taught him a lot. That included survival in the wild. However, it was not very useful for Wu Ming. Therefore, Wu Ming had never fallen sick and could sleep anywhere. On the other hand, Wu Ming's stomach was beyond the stomach of a fantasy breed and could not digest anything. Therefore, survival skills in the wild were just icing on the cake. Paying attention to the dangers in the wild was a lifelong benefit for Wu Ming. After all, even the most powerful person would make mistakes one day. Even the most powerful tiger would take a nap. Now Wu Ming had Fanbaba by his side. With Fanbaba's divine beast temperament, no wild beasts or robbers came to attack Wu Ming. As for those who were related to God, they were only followers and dependents. For example, Wu Ming and Fanbaba, Quizzer and the pterosaur, Tiamat and the magical beasts. However, if there was really an attack, Wu Ming would not be afraid. After all, he had the strength. Although Wu Ming did not need to sleep, it was rare to spend a night in the wild. Wu Ming did not want to spend it all on the road. Moreover, the one who would be tired was Fanbaba. Therefore, Wu Ming was going to stay in the wild with Fanbaba for a night. You think so too, Fanbaba? Woo, Fanbaba also cried, indicating that it also agreed. It was the wish of every Fanbaba to be able to sleep with its master. After drinking the broth, Wu Ming tidied up and then went to sleep with Fanbaba. After that, Wu Ming began to dream. He had a strange dream. Wu Ming came to a black abyss. It was as if he had fallen into a swamp. Ming's movements were particularly difficult, and he could not see anything clearly. Only a sad song echoed. Ming could feel the sadness in this song. A mother was helpless and sad to be abandoned by her children. Ming could not help but be attracted by this song. He gradually looked for the owner of the song in the dark space, trying to drive his body back to his mother's arms. At this moment, Ming heard Fanbaba's cry, and then he was awakened. Woo-woo. Ming suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the bright sky. His head was a little dizzy as he looked around. Fanbaba put down its foreleg that hit Ming's head, and then rubbed its head against Ming's head. Its originally anxious appearance calmed down. Ming didn't know if it was because he was hit by Fanbaba or because of the dream, but now his head was quite dizzy as if he didn't sleep well. That was definitely not a dream, Ming said with some fear. If it wasn't for Fanbaba hitting Ming hard, I'm afraid that Ming would really fall into the arms of the owner of the song, and once that happened, Ming had a hunch that he would never wake up again. After all, his consciousness was transferred from his main body to his servant's body. If his consciousness was captured, then Ming's servant's body would disappear, and his main body in the root would become an empty shell with only a body and soul, but no consciousness. Simply put, he would be in a vegetative state. Thank you, Fanbaba. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I would have died this time. You've helped me a lot. Ming said to Fanbaba gratefully. Because of being praised by Ming, Fanbaba happily rubbed against Ming. Ming touched Fanbaba's head and thought thoughtfully. I've never encountered such a situation before. It seems that I have to protect this point. Ming's body, soul, and consciousness were all born from the root, and compared to the body, Ming's soul was more powerful. Simply put, negative mental effects such as charm would not work on Ming. But this time, Ming almost fell into the enemy's trap while sleeping. More importantly, the pitch-black, immovable space was the interior of the origin black soil. For some reason, Ming couldn't feel the root of the black mud in his dream at all. Maybe it was the enemy's trick. There's also that singing voice. Ming did not recognize it even in his dream. Ming had heard that singing voice before. It was the singing voice he heard when he crossed over to the mirror world in Ilya's world. This familiar feeling. Ming was silent. For a moment, Ming shook his head. In short, the enemy is not simply the three goddesses' alliance. There are more powerful enemies in the dark. As long as it has something to do with the black mud, it can't be underestimated. This time, Ming almost fell into the trap of the song. Sorry, Fanbaba, things have changed again. I have to fly back to the Uruk. You come back first, Ming said to Fanbaba. Although somewhat reluctant, Fanbaba still knew that something unusual had just happened, so it nodded. Then Fanbaba turned into a white spear and integrated into Ming's body. Then Ming transformed into a huge flying dragon and flew to the Uruk. After Ming left, a sad song sounded on the surface of the Persian Gulf, but it disappeared instantly like an illusion. Chapter 396. After leaving the vicinity of the Persian Gulf, Ming did not delay any further. He flapped his wings and flew all the way to Uruk in less than an hour. Ming's wings made a whistling sound. Then Ming slowly landed in front of the Uruk city gate. Sir Hyunryong, you're back. The soldiers guarding the city respectfully greeted the giant dragon in front of them, which was comparable to half of the Uruk city. Gilgamesh had already informed the people of Hyunryong's arrival, so the soldiers guarding the gate were not surprised by Ming's arrival. Ming nodded and transformed into his human form. He did not communicate too much with the soldiers. Ming directly went to the Tower of God at the fastest speed. After all, if he was entangled with the Uruk residents, he would not be able to get away for a while. After arriving at the Tower of God, Ming happened to meet Siduri, who was walking down the Tower of God. It seemed that Siduri was Gilgamesh's assistant, helping Gilgamesh deal with government affairs. Therefore, it was not strange to meet Chief Priest Siduri in the Tower of God. Sir Hyunryong, you're back. Siduri bowed slightly and greeted Ming. Oh, it's Siduri. How is it? Is your body all right? Ming asked with concern. After all, it was because of him that Siduri's vitality was reduced. It's no longer a big problem. I'm really sorry, Sir Hyunryong. As your priest, not only did I not help you, but I also caused you trouble. Siduri really deserves to die. Siduri shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Then Siduri began to blame herself again. It had to be said that Siduri was a little too respectful to Ming. Before Ming left here, Siduri was also like this. She was clearly told not to be too respectful, But Siduri still believed that she should treat God with respect. Especially Hyunryong, who protected the Uruk and allowed the Uruk to develop. Especially after Enkidu's death, Siduri replaced Enkidu as Wuming's personal priest. In Siduri's opinion, she could not be compared to Enkidu at all. This thought made Siduri respect Wuming even more. In addition, not long after Siduri became Wuming's priest, Wuming left the Uruk. This made Siduri have an illusion that, did I disappoint Hyunryong and leave the Uruk? All of this made Siduri respect Wuming very much. Siduri, I don't like humans being too respectful to gods. This includes myself. Wuming instantly looked at Siduri seriously. Siduri also remembered what Wuming said to Siduri after she became Hyunryong's priest. The reason why Hyunryong protected humans was because he hoped that humans would not have to rely on other gods and gradually become independent. There was no need to treat gods as high and mighty beings. It was okay to have an appropriate amount of respect, but too much respect was wrong. Yes, I'm very sorry, Lord Hyunryong. Siduri became even more respectful and was about to kneel down. I say, you don't have to be so respectful to me. Wuming did not know whether to laugh or cry as he supported Siduri, who had not completely knelt down. Yes, Lord Hyunryong. Siduri said sadly. That's why you can't become Enkidu. Wuming's words shocked Siduri. She felt as nervous as when the teacher found out that she was copying homework. Her heart began to waver. Yes, Siduri knew that it was because of Enkidu that she was able to serve Hyunryong better now that Enkidu had left. But this is Siduri, isn't it? Wuming looked at Siduri with a smile, then let go of her and walked towards the god's tower. Siduri remained in a half-kneeling position as she stood rooted to the ground. I am myself. Siduri thought about Wuming's words and said meaningfully. Wuming came to the top floor of the god's tower and walked directly into the room on the top floor. Oh, you're back, Hyunryong. Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked at Wuming, who walked in. Yes, I encountered a lot of things in the south. Wuming said tiredly. This king can guess from your tired face. Tell this king the good news first. Gilgamesh smiled and said to Wuming. Other than Tiamat in the north, there are two other pillar goddesses. They are the Quetzalcoatl of Central and South America and the goddess of the underworld of Mesopotamia. They also have the intention of attacking the Uruk. For this reason, the three pillar goddesses have formed the Three Goddesses Alliance. Wuming sat on the chair beside Gilgamesh and reported his news. This king wants the good news, Hyunryong. Gilgamesh was a little unhappy. Gilgamesh also saw that Wuming deliberately kept him in suspense. Well, good news must be set off by bad news. Next is the good news. Wuming waved his hand and smiled mischievously. Tiamat is only active in the north. With the obstruction of the servants, there is no big problem for the time being. Ereshkigal is unable to leave the underworld and was pushed to the east by the other two pillar goddesses. For the time being, there is no sign of an attack. Wuming took out the map and pointed to the demonic beasts in the north and the remote areas in the east. As for the Quetzalcoatl in the south, she used the dense forest to protect the city and nibbled away Mesopotamia little by little. Then Wuming pointed to Erech Metropolis in the south. About this king has just received news from Ur City. Erech Metropolis is surrounded by dense forest and can no longer be contacted. Gilgamesh said. It seems that the news from Ur City has just reached Uruk. But fortunately, when the enemy only occupied Erech Metropolis and did not have time to approach Ur City, I broke into the temple of the Quetzalcoatl and made a bet with the Quetzalcoatl and won. Wuming smiled and looked at Gilgamesh. Oh, you want to test the content of this king's bet? It is nothing more than the winner obeying the loser's words. Gilgamesh said disdainfully. As expected of Gil. That's right, just like that, I used the Heaven Lock and defeated the Quetzalcoatl effortlessly. At this point, Gilgamesh was silent. Because the Quetzalcoatl's divinity is a kind deity, I pulled her to our side. She will be in charge of cleaning up the lone magical beasts in the south and will help us when the magical beasts attack. Gilgamesh had just received the news about the lone magical beast. Gilgamesh had already begun to set up patrols on the main roads of the city. This is still considered good news. Then, did the Quetzalcoatl make any requests? Even if she was a deity, she was still in existence with dignity. Gilgamesh did not believe that she would obey them unconditionally. She only has one request, and that is to let Erech Metropolis hold wrestling competitions at irregular times. Wuming smiled awkwardly. Wrestling competitions? What a strange fellow. This king agrees. Gilgamesh frowned but still agreed to this strange rule. But it seems that you have other things to report to this king, Hyunryong. Gilgamesh did not think that such a small matter would make Wuming tired. Wuming was silent for a moment, then spoke. Hey Gil, I think I am dreaming of Tiamat. Chapter 397. Wuming told Gilgamesh about his experience in the dream. It was definitely not a simple dream. Gilgamesh also took Wuming's dream very seriously. This was not the first time Wuming had heard this song. When he was traveling through the void and when he was dreaming last night, these two experiences, coupled with Wuming's current identity, and that sense of familiarity, made Wuming suspect that it was Tiamat. Although Tiamat is constantly producing monsters, this king suspects that Tiamat has not appeared in Mesopotamia. She is still in the void, Gilgamesh said thoughtfully. Tiamat had indeed been producing monsters, but this did not mean that Tiamat was in the northern mountains. In the original myth, Tiamat was jointly exiled to the interlayer of the world by her children. In the void, Tiamat had been sleeping like this until modern times. Tiamat was awakened by the mastermind behind the fire, and she began to produce monsters to invade the cities in the north. The inaccessible space you dreamt of, coupled with that strange singing voice, it's very likely that Tiamat hasn't escaped. Gilgamesh pondered. But according to what you said, the Quetzalcoatl, Tiamat, and Ereshkigal have met and formed a contract. This does not make sense. Wuming listened to Gilgamesh's words and he was quite distressed. If the three of them had met, it meant that Tiamat was indeed in the northern mountains. If Tiamat was in the void, why would Quetzalcoatl say that he had met with the other two pillar goddesses? And if Tiamat had really come out of the void, why did she not directly destroy the Uruk? Why did she continue to produce monsters to invade Mesopotamia? I did not ask about Tiamat's appearance. What a blunder. Wuming shook his head helplessly. However, no one would have thought that Tiamat's whereabouts had become a mystery. Tiamat's body was huge. In theory, Tiamat was comparable to a small island. Even if she was hidden underground, it would be difficult to move. Moreover, they had to consider if they could hide her first. In that case, it is very likely that Tiamat's true body did not come out of the void. The one in the north is Tiamat's clone. Due to lack of power, she could only produce monsters to invade the cities in the north. Wuming thought came to the most likely came to his mind. This king thinks so too. Gilgamesh agreed. Speaking of which, the number of demonic beasts in the north is getting more and more. Although they are all red lions, with the passage of time these demonic beasts have grown a lot. If there were no servants, I'm afraid the demonic beasts would have attacked us. Gilgamesh took out a new mud tablet and opened a new map. The monsters will rest at night. Although some of them look for food at night, it can be said that it is a very safe time to retreat at night. Then Gilgamesh pointed to the passages between each town in the north to Wuming. This king's soldiers will let some of the residents in the north retreat through these passages every night. Although there are servants to protect them, the efficiency is too low. Wuming looked at the towns in the north. The roads between the towns were uneven. Some of the surviving towns were not only difficult to travel through, but the residents in the towns were women and children. It was difficult for them to keep up with the rapid retreat at night. Moreover, the map showed that some monsters had appeared even near Nippur city. It could be said that the entire north was no longer safe. So far, with the help of the servants, the north wall established in Nippur city has developed rapidly. But if the reproduction speed and quality of these monsters are improved, they will soon break through. Gilgamesh said calmly. The hidden danger in the south has been solved. There is no more worry in the rear. I can restore my real body to deal with the monsters in the north. The most difficult thing to deal with now is the goddess of the underworld, Ereshkigal, in the east. After all, the enemies on the surface were not terrible, but the enemies in the dark were terrible. As the saying goes, it is easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to defend against a stab in the dark. For Wuming and the others, Ereshkigal, who could not come to the surface and could only do things in the underworld, was an incomparable headache. That guy has the ability to pull people's souls into the underworld, and Sumer's god, like me, can't exert my power in the underworld. Wuming was a little distressed. As mentioned before, Ereshkigal could only be born in the underworld. She could not leave the underworld, but she had obtained the power to be invincible in the underworld. As long as the gods were in the underworld, they could not fight against Ereshkigal. This king knows that guy. Although it is a bit unsuitable for her to become the new ruler of the Sumer, but for the time being she should not do anything. Gilgamesh said the purpose was to make Wuming feel at ease. Then there is no time to lose. I will go to Elysium first and inform Quizhar, and then I will go to the north. Wuming said stood up. These things are not urgent. My soldiers are not so weak that they can't even defeat the current demonic beast. Gilgamesh stopped Wuming's action. What happened, Gil? As Gilgamesh's teacher, Wuming naturally saw Gilgamesh's intention to stop him, but he still had other things to say. Actually, according to the news from the north, a hostile servant has appeared, green hair, a perfect face, white clothes. Gilgamesh did not continue, and Wuming naturally knew who he was talking about. Enkidu? Wuming frowned. Even the chains on Wuming's clothes trembled slightly. The other party has the same combat ability as Enkidu. Although this king does not believe it, this king deliberately went to check Enkidu's tomb, and the body inside has disappeared. Gilgamesh said with some annoyance. His good friend's body was stolen, and it was very likely that Enkidu's personality had been replaced. Thinking of this, Gilgamesh felt a burst of anger. I will go and check, don't worry, Gil. Facing such a thing, Wuming was also a little angry. Although this world was a parallel world, Enkidu was still the Enkidu Wuming knew, and his nature would not change. Then Wuming looked at the clay tablets around Gilgamesh. You should rest early, I will take over these clay tablets for you today. As soon as Wuming said this, Gilgamesh was very unhappy. This king does not need your help, this king can take care of these clay tablets. I don't want future records to say that Gilgamesh is the first king in history to die from overwork, that would be too embarrassing. Wuming looked at Gilgamesh with a teasing smile. Do you think this king can do whatever he wants just because he sealed the Gwaili sword? You're really bold, Hyunryong. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming wantonly. Then give these documents to me, it's not like I haven't taken care of them for you before. Wuming showed a kind smile. Don't mention that to this king, get out of this king's sight immediately. Yes, if this is what King Gilgamesh wants, then I won't say anything else. You and Merlin are the same kind of people, pay attention to Enkidu for this king, and immediately leave the Uruk for this king and go to the north to support him. Then Wuming was kicked out of the Uruk by Gilgamesh. Chapter 398. After all, this was Gilgamesh, the most ancient proud king. Wuming could not outlast him. In the end, Wuming was driven out by Gilgamesh. Oh, isn't this Lord Hyunryong? As soon as they left the tower, Merlin's frivolous voice could be heard. On the street, Wuming met Merlin, who seemed to be heading to the tower. As expected, Merlin, sometimes I really need to give you a good punch. Wuming looked at Merlin rather unhappily. Then Wuming raised his fist. That's bad, I'm not someone who can take a punch from you. Merlin faced Wuming's fist and smiled calmly. I see that you've been running a lot of errands these 2 days, Merlin. Wuming looked at Merlin gloatingly. You're right, King Gilgamesh arranged a lot of things for me. But even so, Merlin still smiled. Speaking of which, I heard that you dreamed of Tiamat? Wuming looked helplessly at Merlin. Needless to say, this guy used clairvoyance again. Wuming did not tell anyone about his dream of Tiamat. As soon as he returned, he told Gilgamesh. The only way Merlin could know about this was through the current clairvoyance. However, since Merlin mentioned it, then there must be something to say. I used clairvoyance to see Tiamat. I don't know why, but there was a black substance that I couldn't see clearly. However, it's very similar to your aura. About that guy in the north, you have to be careful. Because he knew that Wuming was about to go to the front line, he said with a slightly serious tone. That black substance should be the black mud. Back in Britain, Wuming had used his true form, which was accompanied by the unique aura of the Great Origin. Merlin naturally recognized the things that were of the same origin as Wuming. I got it. How are Tachika and the others now? Wuming nodded and asked about Chaldea. Chaldea and the others are working hard to solve the first singularity, but this is interesting. The black and white saintess somehow reminds me of the dark Artoria. Merlin smiled, but his smile gave Wuming a bad feeling. However, with their speed, I'm afraid they won't be able to catch up with the other singularities. Wuming was a little worried. This is something that can't be helped. In the end, they still have to save their own world. With that, Merlin started walking towards the divine pagoda. Wuming did not say anything else. He had to admit that Merlin was right. Humans needed to save their own world by themselves. Whether it was Wuming, Merlin, or the heroic spirits that had died a long time ago, they were not the main characters. The main characters were humans who were constantly looking for hope in despair. When they arrived outside of Uruk City, Wuming activated his relic, transformed into a giant dragon and flew into the clouds. Undeniably, flying was a great ability. In addition to Wuming's massive dragon relic, it only took him a day to fly around the entire Mesopotamia. Wuming first went to the southern city of Eridu. There, Wu-ming told the residents about Gilgamesh's new policy, which was to organize wrestling events at irregular times. Later on, Wu-ming and Quizhar had a fierce wrestling match. That was right. The entire Eridu could feel the vibrations from their wrestling. As Wu-ming was more familiar with Wu-ming, he did not let Quizhar have the upper hand in the wrestling match even though he did not have the upper hand. Hey, I didn't expect Hyunryong to be so talented in wrestling. I'm starting to like you more and more. Do you want to go back to South America with me? Quizhar tempted Wu-ming with a smile on her face. Of course, Wu-ming rejected Quizhar. Putting aside how far they were from South America, he did not know if Quizhar would descend in South America. Later on, Wu-ming instructed Quizhar to do some things. Wu-ming did not go there to let Quizhar participate in the battle in the north. Instead, he wanted Quizhar to wait for an opportunity and try not to expose the fact that he was no longer working with the other two goddess pillars. After Quizhar said okay, Wu-ming flew towards the front line in the north. It took almost half a day to fly from the southernmost to the northernmost. In addition, Wu-ming had started flying from Uruk in the morning. After going to the south and then coming to the north, it was already night time. At this time, the magical beasts had already retreated and started to rest. Although they were magical beasts, they still retained the habits of wild beasts. They rested in the wild and hunted for food during the day. However, this was also good. The tired soldiers who had been fighting the magical beasts for a day could also get sufficient rest. Wu-ming arrived at the city of Babylon. This was the temporary stronghold that Shiro Amakusa had set up. Wu-ming did not arrive in Babylon with great fanfare. Instead, when he was still some distance away from Babylon, he transformed into his human form and quietly entered Shiro Amakusa's residence in Babylon. Welcome, Lord Hyunryong. As if he already knew that Wu-ming would come back, Shiro Amakusa waited for him and then respectfully greeted Wu-ming. You don't have to be like this, Shiro Amakusa. Although I am Hyunryong from Uruk, you and I are both servants. You can address me as an equal. Wu-ming waved his hand. No matter what, the two of them were once enemies who fought to the death. Through Shiro Amakusa's speech, Wu-ming concluded that he still remembered everything about the 14 horsemen. Etiquette cannot be abandoned. You are the teacher of King Gilgamesh, the Uruk's Hyunryong. Even if you are a servant, you are not the same as us. Shiro Amakusa calmly shook his head. Although I still remember the battle between you and me, the winner takes all. I have nothing to say about my defeat. Shiro Amakusa said with a smile. You are indeed worthy of being called a saint. Wu-ming praised. It had to be said that Shiro Amakusa was indeed worthy of being called the saint of the Far East. He spent 60 years on his wish, but it was destroyed just like that. It was useless for him to hate Wu-ming. Let's not talk about this for now. Actually, there is one thing I haven't had the time to report to King Gilgamesh. Shiro Amakusa smiled casually, then his expression began to become serious. Ibaraki Duji betrayed us. Wu-ming frowned. Ibaraki Duji's betrayal was naturally predicted by Wu-ming, but Wu-ming also asked Shiro Amakusa to keep an eye on Ibaraki Duji. Shiro Amakusa's strength was not high, but he was still very smart. If he could let Ibaraki Duji betray us, then it was very likely that Ibaraki Duji chose to betray us, but he did not help the other side. Am I right? Chapter 399. Shiro Amakusa had been monitoring Ibaraki Dojo. If Ibaraki Dojo went to help the other side, Shiro Amakusa, who noticed that something was wrong, would order the multiple servants present to kill Ibaraki Dojo together, but he was afraid that they would fail. Ibaraki Dojo was the only remaining ghost who was able to escape from the battle with Abe Saimai, Lai Hiroshi, and Watanabe Tsuyoshi. The reason why Gilgamesh couldn't control her with the command seal was because Gilgamesh's summoning method wasn't the standard Holy Grail war summoning method. Therefore, Gilgamesh didn't have command seals on the back of his hand. Then Shiro Amakusa nodded with a smile. You're right, because Ibaraki Dojo didn't go to the enemy camp, I didn't choose to stop her. Then Shiro Amakusa pointed to a mountain range not far from Babylon. That guy escaped to the mountain. According to Fuma Kotaro's report, Ibaraki Dojo joined forces with a group of people to become bandits. Don't think that there were no bandits in Mesopotamia. There were always people who didn't conform to discipline, who had no choice but to kill, let alone in this era of more than 2000 BC. Speaking of which, Shiro Amakusa smiled helplessly. She was clearly a powerful ghost, but now she was playing like a child, running to the mountain to become a bandit leader. Wu-ming was also surprised by Ibaraki Dojo's casual nature after hearing this news. Then let's leave her alone for now. As long as she doesn't cause trouble for us, let her be a bandit leader. As long as Ibaraki Dojo didn't help the monsters, it was fine. Where are the other servants now? Wuming asked. Leonidas is building the north wall with the soldiers. After all, Leonidas is good at defense. Okita Soki and Ba Yuzan are covering the residents in other cities. As for Fuma Kotaro. Speaking of which, Wuming and Shiro Amakusa looked at the shadows at the same time. A ninja hiding in the shadows looked at the two of them gently, then closed his eyes. As expected of a famous ninja, he's really suitable for the assassin profession. He's been on standby this entire time. After all, the magical beasts in the wild are all resting, so there's no need for him to gather any information. Shiro Amakusa explained. Wuming nodded and prepared to head out to help Soaring Sky Headquarters and Ba Yuqin cover the retreat of the residents. Then I'll go and help them. If there's nothing important, that's all. After saying that, a white spear fell out of Wuming's sleeve. The white spear melted into the ground and turned into ripples. The holy green beast walked out of the ripples. Woo woo, Wuming rode on Fanbaba and Fanbaba shouted. The ground automatically separated and green vines appeared, enveloping Fanbaba and Wuming. This should be the few remaining cities in the north. I'll look for it myself. There's no time to lose. I'll go first. Wuming's voice came from the vines. Next, the vines entered the cracked ground. Then the ground closed up, leaving no trace behind. Is this the power of the forest's divine beast, Fanbaba? It's quite powerful. Shiro Amakusa praised. I'll have to trouble you tonight. See if you can find the magical beast's lair. Then Shiro Amakusa looked at Fuma Kotaro. Understood. After saying that, the figure in the shadows disappeared. The magical beasts are getting stronger and the casualties are increasing. The soldiers are getting more and more tired. We have to speed up the construction of the north wall. With that, Shiro Amakusa returned to his room and continued with Wuming's work. Outside of Babylon, the ground cracked open, and giant vines appeared from within. The vines spread out and Fanbaba and Wuming's figures appeared. Then the vines returned to the ground, and the cracks in the ground closed up again, leaving no trace behind. This was Fanbaba's ability. As a divine beast of the forest, it could still manipulate the vines to move under the ground. But it only did this because it was afraid of affecting the residents of Babylon. Let's go there first. I remember there was a city that survived the attack of the magical beast. After all, Wuming had intelligence. Wuming basically remembered the location of the remaining cities in the north. Wuming's current idea was that if he didn't encounter Okita Soki and Ba Yuzan, then Wuming was ready to cover the evacuation of the people in the town. After all, the magical beasts were decreasing at night. With the cover of 2 servants, they could still safely evacuate. Under Wuming's command, Fanbaba began to move. It had to be said that God really took care of Wuming. Wuming chose a city. The city in front of him was indeed the city where Okita Soki and Ba Yuzan covered the evacuation tonight. Not far away on the main road that connected the cities, Wuming saw the light of fire, the gleam of blades, and the screams of human beings. This time it was no longer the red lion Ulidim, but countless blue crawling creatures. The tails of these creatures were high, and the poisonous needles on the tails were shining even in the dark night. Purple venom flowed on the tails as if it was about to drip down. Countless mushifu attacked the migrating humans frantically. Anyone who was stung by the mushifu's poisonous needles couldn't survive, and all of them died of poison. Okita Soki and Ba Yuzan crazily killed these mushifu. Their swords danced and flames burst. However, against these countless mushifu who only attacked the residents, the effect was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Fanbaba. Under Wuming's order, Fanbaba gently stomped its foot. Countless vines emerged from the ground and instantly surrounded all the mushifu and residents. Then, the countless vines seemed to be able to distinguish between demonic beasts and humans. They turned into sharp thorns and penetrated all the mushifu. In an instant, the whole battlefield quieted down. The survivors simply paid their respects to the dead. Because of the mushifu's poison, no one dared to touch these corpses. Then they continued on their way in grief. Fanbaba gathered the corpses that had been poisoned, and Wuming used the Lune Rune to burn these poisonous corpses. Of course, the corpses of the demonic beasts were also burned. After all, the poisonous corpses were not easy to deal with, and burying them would only pollute the environment. Okita Soki walked at the front, Ba Yuzan in the middle and Wuming at the back. The 3 divided the work. Thank you so much, Hyunryong-sama. Ba Yuzan, who was walking in the middle, slowly retreated to the back and chatted with Wu Ming. What happened just now? Didn't you say that the demonic beasts would rest at night? Why are there so many demonic beasts moving at night? Wu Ming asked. We don't know. We didn't find them when we were scouting. Then countless demonic beasts suddenly appeared. Then you came. Ba Yuzhen was a little sad. After all, it was a sudden situation and many people died. Although there have been demonic beast attacks before, there were only a few or a small number of them. Today it was the first time I saw a group of demonic beasts attacking during the day. Ba Yuzhen continued. Let's cover these residents and return to the north wall first. With Fanbaba here, there won't be any problems tonight. Woo woo, Fanbaba also cried out. With demonic beast Sama and Hyunryong Sama here, I am relieved. Ba Yuzhen also nodded. In this way, Wu Ming and the other two covered the surviving residents and arrived at Babylon. Chapter 400. What? A large number of demonic beasts attacked you, and they are a new breed of demonic beasts. Shiro Amakusa looked at Okita Soki and Ba Yuzhen and said with some surprise. After all, demonic beasts suddenly changed their habits, making it impossible to guard against them, but this was something that couldn't be helped. That is indeed the case, and the crisis was only resolved after I arrived. Wu Ming stood aside and testified for the two. It's not that I don't believe their words, but the sudden attack surprised me. Shiro Amakusa shook his head, indicating that he didn't doubt Okita Soki and Ba Yuzhen's words. Wu Ming naturally understood, and then began to analyze the reason for the attack. There are two possibilities. One is that there is a commander among the demonic beasts, and the other is that these new breeds of demonic beasts fight at night. Wu Ming proposed two possibilities. If there is a commander, the green-haired girl suspected to be Enkidu on the battlefield is very likely to be the commander. Okita Soki remembered the green-haired girl during the day. However, we can't deny that these new breeds of demonic beasts fight at night. Maybe the large number of demonic beasts just now were hatched by Tiamat. Ba Yuzhen also said. In any case, this matter must be taken seriously. Assassin, please tell King Gilgamesh about this. With that said, Shiro Amakusa looked at Fuma Kotaro, who was standing in the shadows without speaking. Although Fuma Kotaro was sent out by Shiro Amakusa to find Tiamat's nest, because of the emergency just now, he used the communication technology to call Fuma Kotaro back. Understood. After that, Fuma Kotaro disappeared in an instant. It seems that he is going to Uruk overnight. Then you guys go and rest first. I will let Fanbaba scout around Babylon to ensure that there are no enemies attacking, Wu Ming said. They still have to deal with the attack of demonic beasts the next day. If they don't rest, it will be very unfavorable for them the next day. In that case, I will trouble Hyunryong Sama. Afterward, Okita Soki and Ba Yuzhen both retreated to rest. Early the next morning, the demonic beasts would begin to wreak havoc, so they had to rest well. Ruler, I have something to ask you. Once only Wu Ming and Shiro Amakusa were left in the room, Wu Ming spoke. Hyunryong Sama probably wants to ask about the young girl suspected to be Enkidu. Shiro Amakusa smiled. To be honest, I'm not very familiar with that young lady. Saber and Archer have only fought with her for a short while, so I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint Lord Hyunryong. Shiro Amakusa's meaning was that they weren't clear on the girl's situation. I see. Sorry to disturb you. I'll leave first. Fanbaba is still waiting for me outside. Take care. Then Wu Ming left the place. In the room. Wu Ming, who had left the room, had a serious expression on his face. After all, the Enkidu in that world was saved by Wu Ming and brought to the root to be upgraded. However, the Enkidu in this world did not. Wu Ming was worried that Enkidu had been modified by Tiamat and was being used by her. Clank, the sound of chains could be heard. The heaven lock that was attached to Wu Ming's clothes moved automatically and stroked Wu Ming's cheeks. Lilin. Wu Ming touched the chains and took the opportunity to calm down. Wu Ming came to Uruk through the Holy Grail. Since the heaven lock had become his rider, knight, noble phantasm, Enkidu's consciousness naturally followed him. Wu Ming, Sama, please don't be confused. A gentle voice appeared in Wu Ming's mind. If I'm really modified by Tiamat in this world, then all you have to do is to defeat me. If someone impersonates my body, then all you have to do is to punish that person. Although it's my body, I believe that Enkidu in this world will agree with what you're doing. The golden chains glowed faintly as they communicated with Wu Ming through telepathy. I'm not that weak. I'm just a little hesitant. Really? Wu Ming said with a bitter smile. Don't worry. Your body has done something wrong. I'll punish her properly. You don't have to worry about that. The golden chains rubbed Wuming a few times and then returned to Wuming's clothes. When he came out of the courtyard, Fanbaba was lying on the ground waiting. Because of the concealment spell that Wuming had set up, none of the residents noticed Fanbaba. Let's go, Fanbaba. There's work to be done. Woo, because almost all of the northern cities had fallen, a large number of people were forced to move south. Now, the residents of the northern cities were either dead or had come to Babylon and Nippur. There were very few refugees left in other cities, but just in case, Bai Yuqian continued to search and rescue. The refugees tonight were an example. Now, almost all of the refugees had gathered in Babylon and Nippur, preparing to retreat through these two cities to the north wall that was under construction. Therefore, there were a large number of refugees in Babylon. Coupled with the refugees who had just migrated tonight, Babylon was actually very crowded. If there was a sudden attack by a magical beast in the middle of the night, not to mention the soldiers, these refugees would at least be buried here. Of course, that was in the absence of Wuming and other servants. Wuming took Fanbaba to the outside of Babylon. With the activation of Fanbaba's ability, countless vines were hidden around the city of Babylon. As long as any magical beast passed by, these vines would have an alarm effect. Not only could it trap the magical beast, but it could also let Fanbaba know, so that they could start to defend against the magical beast attack. Tonight I'll leave it to you, Fanbaba. Wuming touched Fanbaba's head. Woo, Fanbaba replied. Although it was said that he got rid of Fanbaba, Wuming was not ready to go to sleep, but he was ready to stay up all night. Wuming looked at the bright moon in the sky and could not help but miss the days with Enkidu and Gilgamesh. At that time the king was still young, the weapons did not understand the human heart, and the god was still a weak guy. Now everything had changed. The king became very clear, the weapons also understood the human heart and gained friendship, and the god also became strong and had the power to protect others. In the distance, Gilgamesh put down the clay board in his hand and went to the window to enjoy the full moon. I haven't seen the Uruk moon for a long time, as boring as ever. Gilgamesh said indifferently, but his eyes did not leave the moon. In the north, the girl with long green hair looked at the corpse of the magical beast that had been burned to ashes and looked up at the bright moon. For a moment, the girl did not say anything and left here and returned to the northern mountains. Chapter 401. The next day. A night passed and there were no demonic beasts. Fanbaba hid the vines around Babylon in case of emergency. Wuming did not choose to return to Babylon but stayed outside. Last night, Shiro Amakusa told Wuming that because the demonic beasts were getting stronger and stronger, every time the soldiers resisted, they would suffer a lot of damage. Therefore, Shiro Amakusa began to use defensive tactics. Because Babylon was not suitable for defense, everyone set up traps and various defensive measures in the north of Babylon. The purpose was to resist the attack of the demonic beasts. Now, Babylon's army had been assembled, and the reason why Wuming did not choose to return to Uruk was because Wuming wanted to personally meet these demonic beasts. After waiting for a few minutes, it was time for the demonic beasts to attack. Roar. Hiss. The roar of the demonic beasts could be heard. The red lion and the blue poison-tailed lizard came from afar. Like a group of rushing red and blue sea, the two types of demonic beasts mixed together and attacked Babylon. There are so many demonic beasts, even with the help of servants they can't stop them. Wuming frowned. After all, such a group of demonic beasts was not something that Shiro Amakusa and the other servants could resist. It seems like what Shiro Amakusa said is true. These days the demonic beasts have begun to become stronger. After saying that, Wuming got down from Fanbaba and began to prepare magic. Although I came as a rider, I can still use Loon magic and Yggdrasil, World Tree, magic. After saying that, Wuming raised both of his hands, one hand drew something and the other hand lit up a magic circle. Flame, ice, holy light, black fog, vines, water blade, rock, countless low-level magic were cast by Wuming, facing the demonic beasts rushing toward this side. It had to be said that no matter how powerful a magical beast was, it would be akin to a moth darting into a flame if it were to use its physical body to charge at Lin Li. Roar. Hiss. The magic beast's blood-curdling screams kept echoing as one magic beast after another collapsed, turning into pure mana and disappearing. This might be the price of magic beasts becoming stronger. Ever since the magic beasts started to become more powerful, the magic beasts that died would turn into mana and disappear instead of leaving behind a physical body. However, this was also good. If the corpses were left behind, it would be troublesome to clean up the battlefield. As expected, they're just a bunch of beasts that only know how to kill. They don't have the ability to scheme at all, Wu Ming said with some disdain. If it wasn't for the fact that there were too many magical beasts, the intelligence of the people in each city would have been enough to defend against them. But this is also good. There's no need to care too much about things like props, Fanbaba, Wu Ming said to Fanbaba. Woo, Fanbaba responded, taking a step forward and slightly straightening its body. Countless vines broke out of the ground like a huge python, soaring into the sky. Some entangled the magic beasts like a blender, crushing their prey. Some were like sharp blades, piercing through the magic beasts. Some simply tore their prey apart. Fortunately, these magic beasts would immediately turn into pure mana and disappear after death, so there was no need to care about the blood or the piling up of corpses. Although the magic beasts suffered heavy losses, the remaining magic beasts didn't shrink back. As if they didn't know that there was nothing, the other magic beasts still rushed forward one after another. Sure enough, props born for battle. Looking at these magic beasts rushing forward one after another, Wu Ming shook his head disinterestedly. In that case, all returned to the underworld. Wu Ming used a more powerful move like a cannon, constantly bombarding the attacking magic beasts. Fanbaba also worked harder, attacking the magic beasts in the gaps of the explosions caused by Wu Ming's skills. It had to be said that the cooperation between the two was perfect. The violent explosions even changed the terrain, creating craters one after another. Countless vines emerged from the gaps between the explosions, creating even more craters and wiping out the lone magic beasts one after another. Soon, countless pits joined together, turning the northern plains of Babylon into a basin. Almost a few minutes later, Wu Ming and Fanbaba stopped attacking. Smoke filled the northern part of Babylon, and countless magic beasts turned into pure mana particles, leaving only the changed terrain, proving that the magic beasts once existed. However, Wu Ming didn't show an expression that he had finished, but looked at the smoke in front of him solemnly. The number of magic beasts couldn't be this small. There was no doubt that the magic beasts that only knew how to attack temporarily retreated. If that was the case, then there must be something similar to a commander. Could it be? Just as Wu Ming was worried, a figure walked out of the smoke. Long green hair, a rare beauty, and white clothes that didn't have a single speck of dust on them. Without a doubt, this was Enkidu, who was originally dead. Putting that aside, Wu Ming sensed a special energy from Enkidu's body. Then Wu Ming spoke. As expected, the rest of the magic beasts retreated under your command. Wu Ming looked at Enkidu with an indescribable expression. Master Hyunryong, long time no see. Enkidu said to Wu Ming as if they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Don't give me that. Am I worth it? You're not Enkidu. Wu Ming's expression didn't change at all as he said calmly. As expected, pretending in front of me will definitely get exposed. Enkidu said self-deprecatingly, then showed a proud expression. To be honest, this body misses you very much. I can't help but respect and love you, Master Hyunryong. Enkidu smiled calmly and didn't feel annoyed that he was exposed. Although you're using Enkidu's body, your performance is too different from Enkidu's. I can tell that you're a fake with one look. Wu Ming said calmly. It can't be helped, I'm just a fake. Enkidu didn't get angry at Wu Ming's words and replied with a smile. Let me tell you, I'm very angry that I'm using Enkidu's body. Wu Ming closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them and looked at Enkidu. This gaze made Enkidu tremble with fear as if he was looking directly at death. A trace of cold sweat trickled down his back. Let's put this aside for now. I'm going to ask you directly, is your heart the Holy Grail? Chapter 402. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Enkidu quickly retreated and covered her chest with her hands. Although she looked like a young girl who was about to be violated and was trying to defend herself, as expected of Lord Hyunryong to be able to sense my heart, Enkidu looked at Wu Ming with extreme vigilance and sneered. As expected, Enkidu's heart is the holy grail of this singularity. However, Wu Ming shook his head and covered his chest with his hand. You can feel it too, right? My heart is also a holy grail. Wu Ming was based on the holy grail that formed the singularity of Fuyuki City. With it as the heart, he formed the rider, cavalry, class spirit base. Although Enkidu hid it well, the holy grail of the Winterwood City singularity and other singularities were somewhat related. Wu Ming already felt a sense of familiarity when Enkidu arrived, and only now did he confirm that it was the holy grail. Now that you mention it, I feel it too. Enkidu, also looked at Wu Ming's chest and could vaguely see a holy grail that was beating like a heart. "Since you already know, I can only leave," Enkidu said as she prepared to leave. But the moment she turned around, she stopped and looked at Wu Ming. "As mother's child and with the feelings of this body, I don't want you to die. Let me give you a piece of advice, Lord Hyunryong, give up on the humans and join our side." After saying that, Enkidu began to retreat. At the same time, countless monsters appeared behind Enkidu to provide cover. Wu Ming did not chase Enkidu and let her leave. Wu Fanbaba walked in front of Wu Ming and protected Wu Ming behind him. Although there was no need to protect him with his master's ability, he couldn't allow these small fries to harass his master. Fanbaba released its vines to kill the magic beasts that were rushing over. The magic beasts were not afraid of death and resolutely continued to charge. Wu Ming stood behind Fanbaba and watched Enkidu disappear into the crowd of magical beasts. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, a gentle voice sounded. "Aren't you going to stop it?" Wu Ming's golden chains made a sound. "There's no need for that. Even if we eliminate this singularity now, that guy will definitely find a way to send us another holy grail." Wu Ming shook his head. "Besides, that's your body, so I can't really do it." Wu Ming smiled embarrassedly. "Master Wu Ming, you're really gentle." The chains shook gently and then became silent. "Well, it's time to clean up these items," Wu Ming said and joined the slaughter of the magic beasts. Later, with the cooperation of Wu Ming and Fanbaba, the magic beasts that gathered in the north of Babylon were all killed. After that, Wu Ming rode Fanbaba toward the north, but the magic beasts seemed to be scared and almost disappeared. In the afternoon, Wu Ming rode Fanbaba back to Babylon. After being welcomed by the excited people and soldiers, Wu Ming entered the meeting hall of the servants. Leaving Fanbaba in the huge open space outside the meeting hall, Wu Ming walked into the meeting hall. Clap, clap, clap. As soon as Wu Ming entered the meeting hall, he heard the sound of applause. As expected of the patron saint of Uruk, the teacher of the ancient king, the great and mysterious figure known as Hyunryong. Then Shiro Amakusa's flattering voice came. "With the help of Hyunryong-sama, we will be able to destroy the magic beasts." Ba Yuzan said with a voice like that of Yamato. "Well, Hyunryong-sama is as reliable as Takaka-san and Kondo-san, no more reliable than them," Okita Soki said with a smile. "You must be referring to the bravest man in the world. It's hard to believe that if there was someone like you in the battle at Hot Spring Gate, the outcome would have been different than mine," Leonidas, whose face was hidden by the helmet, said. However, Wu Ming just smiled at these praises, then shook his head. "You must be joking, those magic beasts are just some miscellaneous soldiers. They are all the inferior mass-produced children of Tiamat's magical beasts. They can't even be considered as living creatures, they can only be regarded as tools. If the real Tiamat's magical beasts appear, I'm afraid they won't be weaker than the servants." Wu Ming didn't get carried away by the praises of the servants because he knew that these magic beasts were just simple miscellaneous soldiers. They relied on their numbers to gain an advantage. Even Shiro Amakusa and the others had no problem killing these magic beasts if they had an unlimited supply of magic power. Of course, in addition to the magic power, there was another point. Shiro Amakusa and the others were there to protect the people, not to attack the enemy, so there was no need to be like Wu Ming. More importantly, the number and variety of magic beasts is likely to increase again. With Tiamat's continuous optimization of magic beasts, the magic beasts may become stronger and stronger. In the later stage, whether it's the number or quality of magic beasts, I'm afraid that a single servant can't kill them alone," Wu Ming said slightly solemnly. The others also realized this problem, and their faces were full of seriousness. About this problem, King Gilgamesh has already sent news. At this time, Shiro Amakusa spoke. "Last night, Mr. Fuma went to Uruk overnight and conveyed the news of the current front line to King Gilgamesh. Then King Gilgamesh made a plan overnight and asked Mr. Fuma to bring it back." On the other side of the meeting hall, Fuma Kotaro appeared from the shadows as if to confirm Shiro Amakusa's words. Shiro Amakusa took out the information that Fuma Kotaro handed in last night. King Gilgamesh's new order is for servants to put down their work and help speed up the construction of the northern wall. Move the people who stayed in Babylon and Nippur to the back of the northern wall as soon as possible and complete the magic beast front. Shiro Amakusa read the content on the clay board. "But who will resist the magic beasts here? There are also the people who survived in the cities. There are also a few cities that we have confirmed that there are still people left," Okita Soki said with some confusion. In this regard, before Shiro Amakusa could speak, Wuming laughed first. I will defend the front line alone, including the rescue of the remaining people. The other servants and soldiers will go to the northern wall. Is that what King Gilgamesh said? Wuming said with great certainty as if he guessed Gilgamesh's meaning. Shiro Amakusa laughed. As expected of Hyunryong-sama, the king's teacher. That's right, for the time being Hyunryong-sama will take over the defense of the front line, and the rescue work will be the same. King Gilgamesh said in the letter, this king's teacher is there, you can let him take over. This is how teachers are used at this time. Don't worry, he is much more useful than you. That's what King Gilgamesh meant. Shiro Amakusa finished reading. What a cruel king. He actually let his own teacher take over. If he was in the Shinsengumi he would definitely be resisted. Okita Soki said with some helplessness. Well, but Hyunryong-sama is indeed more useful than us. It is a great honor to be able to get the help of Hyunryong. Leonidas smiled casually at Gilgamesh's ridicule in the letter. Then let's do it this way. Some of you will cover the residents of Babylon and Nippur to leave here. Some of you will go back to the northern wall to help build the wall. I will defend the front line. Ruler, tell me the location of the remaining people in the cities. I will go and save them. Well, then let's do it this way. Chapter 403. Soon, Shiro Amakusa told Wuming the location of the city with the remaining citizens. The servants were divided into two troops, one went to the north wall to build the wall, and the other escorted the citizens to evacuate. The army was also divided into two groups. One group followed the servants to the north wall and went to build the north wall. The other group stayed behind to escort the citizens. Later, Shiro Amakusa, Leonidas, and Fumakotaro led the army to the north wall to help build the defense. Okita Soki and Bayuzan were arranged to cover the evacuation of Babylon and Nippur, and the army was also divided into two troops. It felt like he was taking care of the girls. Cough cough. After that, Wuming also left Babylon. It seemed like the demonic beasts were afraid of Wuming and Funbaba. Wuming left Funbaba behind, and he went to the city with the remaining citizens that Shiro Amakusa said to rescue. When night came, Wuming returned to Funbaba alone. Funbaba didn't lie down to rest this time, but he was walking around like a patrol. How is it, Funbaba? Is there anything unusual? Woo woo. Hearing Wuming's question, Funbaba shook his head and said twice, indicating that there was nothing unusual. Is that so? Wuming already understood why there was nothing unusual. In the towns that Wuming went to, there was no one left. At that time, Wuming checked the city, and the traces of the demonic beast's invasion were quite obvious. Wuming carefully searched the town, but Wuming didn't find any living people, not even corpses. Except for some blood on the ground, only the panicked town was left empty. It seemed that the rest of the people were dragged to the nest by the demonic beasts. With his own speed, Wuming quickly checked all the towns in the north. Wuming discovered something. No matter who it was, there were very few bloodstains. Currently, there were no magical beasts with mouths big enough to swallow a person whole. Since that was the case, there was only one possibility. Although it's inconceivable, those people should have all been transported back to their nest by the magical beasts. Wuming said with a grave expression. And why did the magical beasts transport those people back to their lair? Serve as food reserves? To become nourishment for Tiamat? Serving as nutrients for the production of other magic beasts? Although it was cruel to say this, but they had already entered the lair of the magical beasts, and the magical beasts could do whatever they wanted. Woo woo. Funbaba lowered its head and rubbed against Wuming to comfort him. Although I'm not in a good mood, I'm more worried about one thing. Wuming patted Funbaba, indicating that he wasn't worried, and then continued. Say, do you think those people will be transformed into demonic beasts after they've been captured? This sentence made Funbaba a little stunned. I don't think that Tiamat, who can produce so many demonic beasts, needs nourishment, and I don't think these demonic beasts will bring people back just to store food for their own kind. Then Wuming smiled casually. Of course, I'm just guessing, and it's very possible that my guess is wrong. Although he said this, Wuming's smile immediately became calm. And that person using Enkidu's body, she must be related to Tiamat. To be able to steal Enkidu's body without anyone noticing, it must be that person or his 72 subordinates who did it. But since they were able to entrust the Holy Grail to them, act together with Tiamat's demonic beasts, and tell me that they are both children of the same mother, there is no doubt that she must be related to Tiamat, and their relationship is not shallow, Wuming said with certainty, and then began to think about who the real person in Enkidu's body was. Woo woo, looking at the frowning Wuming, Fanbaba stepped forward and pushed the unprepared Wuming to the ground, and then pressed its huge head on Wuming's body. Wait, Fanbaba, what are you doing? Being pushed down, Wuming was startled and his thoughts jumped out of his thoughts. Woo woo, Fanbaba ignored Wuming's question, and continued to act like a spoiled child, constantly rubbing against Wuming. But little did he know that with the huge Fanbaba rubbing against him like this, Wuming couldn't take it. I know, I won't think about it anymore, get off of me first. Woo woo. After a short period of disturbance, Wuming got rid of Fanbaba's spoiled child. Then it was already evening and the sun had set. Really, don't jump on me in the future, your head is bigger than my body, how can you just jump on me like that? Wuming sorted out the disturbance caused by Fanbaba, and said to Fanbaba somewhat helplessly. Woo woo, Fanbaba sat there obediently, like a child who admitted its mistake. Well, I'm not blaming you, be careful next time. Seeing the listless Fanbaba, Wuming was amused and then quickly comforted Fanbaba. Woof woo, after being touched by its master, Fanbaba showed a happy expression. For a moment, Wuming sat on Fanbaba, and Fanbaba carried Wuming slowly towards the north. Wuming looked at the endless plains in the north, as well as the mountainous fir forest in the northwest. There was no doubt that the magical beasts had come from there. Speaking of which, the fir forest seems to be your territory, Fanbaba. Wuming suddenly remembered that Fanbaba used to live in the fir forest. Woo woo, Fanbaba's huge head nodded, its current state was like having a home that it couldn't go back to. Well, but you actually don't care, right? Wuming just smiled at this. Fanbaba didn't care about its residence, and the fir forest was just a good forest, so Fanbaba settled there. Woo woo, Fanbaba was very happy. After Fanbaba had Wuming as its master, it was very happy to follow its master. Looking at the lights of Babylon behind him, Wuming asked Fanbaba, "Have the vines been set up?" Whoa. Because Wuming needed to defend against the attack of the magical beasts alone, Fanbaba began to set up vines underground when Wuming went to look for survivors during the day. Don't think that Fanbaba was really just strolling. Very good, then now we just have to wait for the magical beasts to attack. I have a hunch that the magical beasts will attack tonight, Wuming said seriously. Although it wanted to complain about how its master knew, Fanbaba didn't ask for a rebuff, anyway, it just followed its master. After that, until almost dawn, there was no movement on the plains, not even a bird or a rabbit could be seen. It's coming. Chapter 404. Coming. After Wuming said that, Fanbaba raised its head and looked ahead. The night in Mesopotamia was dark. If there was no light, it would be hard to see. Countless red dots appeared in the forest of fir trees in the distant mountainous region. Those were the shining eyes of demonic beasts at night. Of course, the degree of danger was the same. On the plain in front of Wuming there were many red dots. Looking at the number, there were more demonic beasts than during the day. Roar. Accompanied by the charge and roar of the demonic beasts, the earth began to tremble. If these demonic beasts really rushed over, perhaps all the citizens of Babylon and Nippur would suffer. Did all these demonic beasts come out? Does Tiamat want to start a full-scale war now? Wuming said seriously, his tone was puzzled. Starting a war first was not good for either side. The human side that had not yet established the North Wall would suffer heavy losses, but Tiamat, who was in the northern mountains, would also lose the protection of the demonic beasts. The servants could form a surprise attack force and go straight to the root of the problem. With so many demonic beasts coming, coupled with the tremors on the ground, Babylon, which was currently closest to the north, must have noticed. After all, since there was an example of a demonic beast attack at night, whether it was Babylon or Nippur, they had sent more people to guard the night for fear of a sudden attack by demonic beasts. Don't worry about that, Fanbaba raised the vine wall. Wuming had no time to study those things, the most important thing now was to stop the attack of the demonic beast. Woo, Fanbaba understood and walked forward for a distance, then its huge feet gently stomped on the ground like an earthquake. Rumble, a green wall rose behind Fanbaba and Wuming. Taking a closer look, it was a wall made of vines. The vine wall was oriented from east to west. That's right, it was the same as the north wall. However, compared to the north wall, the vine wall made by Fanbaba was very weak. Because it was made in a hurry, the most it could do was to resist the attack of the magical beasts tonight. If the magical beasts continued to attack without any external interference, a hole would appear in the vine barrier when it was almost dawn. When the sky was completely bright, the vine barrier would completely collapse. Of course, if Enkidu had come, the outcome would have been different. The vine barrier might not even last for a moment. This was the reason why Wuming and Fanbaba were outside the vine barrier. They wanted to stop Enkidu from destroying the vine barrier and reduce the number of monsters as much as possible. Wuming got down from the Fanbaba and walked to the front of the Fanbaba. One man and one beast stood there. Although they were facing thousands of magical beasts, they did not panic at all. Then let's begin. Let's party all night. As he spoke, Wuming's hands began to move non-stop. Lines of Lune runes were drawn by Wuming's hands. Each Lune rune seemed to be able to find a matching Lune rune. They began to combine and attack the magical beasts in the distance. Fanbaba was not idle either. It controlled countless vines to rush out from the ground and attack the magical beasts that were rushing towards them. Countless Lune runes appeared in Wuming's hands. Together with the vines that kept coming out from the ground, they strangled the magical beasts that were rushing towards them. Although the magical beasts were almost in front of Wuming, if this was the extent of it, then the magical beast that came out in full force tonight would be annihilated. And Wuming didn't think that there would only be magical beasts attacking. And now Wuming once again proved how accurate his intuition was. Without a doubt it was Enkidu. As for Wuming, who currently possessed extremely high divinity, once he was entangled by Enkidu, he would not be able to move for a short period of time. The enemy also saw this point and used Enkidu. At the same time, a golden chain extended from Wuming's body and wrapped around the silver chain. This was an action initiated by Wuming's Enkidu consciousness. Wuming did not participate. Walala. The golden chain and silver chain entangled with each other and let out ear-piercing sounds. As expected, Sir Hyunryong, the chain on your body is Enkidu. At this moment, Enkidu's voice sounded from the magical beasts. Enkidu walked out from the magical beast. The area around Enkidu was like a forbidden zone where no magical beasts dared to approach. As expected, you're the only one who can use Enkidu. Wu Ming was relieved. There were only two Enkidu in this world. One was Gilgamesh's, but Gilgamesh's Enkidu had always been sealed in the treasury. The other was naturally Enkidu's body. As a god-made armament, Enkidu could transform into Enkidu. Therefore, only the person using Enkidu's body had Enkidu's Enkidu. Wuming's Enkidu naturally came from Enkidu in the parallel world. Like an ill-fated relationship, Enkidu in this world and Enkidu in the parallel world converged. The silver chain extended from Enkidu's sleeves, and the end was connected to the golden chain. Don't even think about harming Sir Wuming. At this moment, Enkidu heard a voice through the golden chain. Enkidu was startled. That voice was not unfamiliar to Enkidu. It was a voice that Enkidu was extremely familiar with. It was the same voice as this body's. So that's how it is. Is that the real Enkidu? Enkidu received the real Enkidu's voice through the connection between the two chains. At the same time, the golden chain transmitted some other information to Enkidu. In that instant, Enkidu saw a lot of things, heard a lot of things, and even felt a lot of things. Damn it. Enkidu was shocked and immediately put away the chain. The golden chain did nothing to stop it. Almost at the same time, the silver chain returned to Enkidu, and the golden chain returned to Wuming. Enkidu closed one of his eyes and painfully covered his other eye with one hand. Sir Wuming, as expected, you're more skilled. Be careful, Mother will personally take action. Enkidu said painfully and then disappeared among the monsters. Without a doubt, Enkidu had retreated. Just as Enkidu finished speaking, the ground began to shake even more violently than before. Chapter 405. Wuming and Fanbaba couldn't care less about killing the demonic beasts that were already charging towards them, because the ground in front of them had already undergone an unprecedented change. On the boundless plain, the earth began to crack from the center, and then the entire earth was completely torn apart. Then a huge figure appeared from the earth. The figure was more than 100 stories tall, with an incomparably huge snake tail, sharp and terrifying claws, a body and face covered in scales, and a head full of ferocious snake hair. Its huge eyes flashed with a dangerous scarlet light as it stared at Wuming and Fanbaba, who were like ants in front of it. Boom! Fanbaba replaced Wuming to clean up the surrounding demonic beasts a little, and Wuming, who was free, looked at this prehistoric giant beast. This familiar feeling, this divinity, it's actually Tiamat? Wuming looked at the snake hair goddess in front of him with some surprise. However, Wuming could clearly recognize that the snake hair goddess in front of him was a Greek demonic beast, Medusa who devoured 2 of her sisters, and transformed into an avenger demonic beast, Gorgon. A Gorgon that was given Tiamat's personality, but to be honest it's really a good match. Wu-Ming didn't panic in the face of danger and instead he smiled. But then again, Enkidu actually said not long after Enkidu retreated, "It was a little too honest, wasn't it? Fanbaba, you should retreat," Wu-Ming said to Fanbaba who was continuously killing the demonic beasts around him and working hard. Woo-woo? Fanbaba naturally shook its head, and then rubbed its head against Wu-Ming. "Alright, I'll take care of it. These vines still need your protection. You should know that there are countless lives behind these vines. Be a good girl." Wu-Ming gently stroked Fanny Baba's head, persuading her with both logic and emotion. Woo-woo, Fanbaba was silent for a few seconds and then nodded. "Good child, so obedient," Wu-Ming smiled gently at Fanbaba. Then Fanbaba released one last attack to repel the surrounding demonic beasts. Then Fanbaba left this place through the vines and went to the interior of the vine barrier. "Okay, now I'm the only one left." Wu-Ming looked at the giant demonic beast Gorgon. However, Gorgon didn't answer Wu-Ming's question, either because it didn't know how to speak or because it didn't want to. Instead, it directly launched an attack. The countless snake heads on Gorgon's hair opened their mouths and gathered magic. Then, countless snake heads shot out heat rays, burying the place where Wu-Ming was, including the demonic beast. Rumble? A powerful explosion occurred. The dust and flames of the explosion covered Wu-Ming's figure, and Gorgon stopped moving. "Really? What a warm greeting, fake Tiamat." Wu-Ming's voice came from the smoke. "Who?" A huge white dragon claw came out of the smoke, like a dragon out of the clouds, and stretched towards Gorgon at an extremely fast speed. Gorgon was shocked and immediately controlled the snake hair to intercept it. Hiss hiss hiss. As if its target was the snake hair from the beginning, the dragon claw grabbed the snake hair and tore it off. Gorgon let out a scream that didn't belong to a human. "It's impolite not to reciprocate. Are you satisfied with this greeting gift of mine?" A calm voice came. A huge dragon emerged from the smoke caused by the explosion as if it had come out of a small spacetime tunnel. The pure white dragon god had shining dragon scales, holy dragon horns, and white dragon wings that were twice the size of its body. Its holy dragon claws were still holding on to the struggling broken snake hair. Then a white flame burned the snake hair, completely incinerating it. Gorgon spoke. "Damn Hyunryong." Gorgon's hoarse voice came out of his throat like a broken bellows. "As long as I'm here, don't even think about going back alive today, fake Tiamat." Just like that, the huge snake hair monster and the sacred dragon of protection started a confrontation in the plains in front of Babylon, a city in the north of Mesopotamia. The battle between mother and son in Mesopotamia had begun for the second time. Uruk City Divine Tower. Because Mesopotamia was mainly plains, Gorgon, who was more than a few hundred stories tall, and Gorgon, who was only as tall as Wu-Ming, appeared near Babylon. They were seen by the entire Uruk city, which wasn't far from Babylon. "Tiamat. Gorgon?" Gilgamesh looked at Tiamat, and fell into deep thought. "King Gilgamesh, king." Then Siduri's voice came from the stairs of the Divine Tower. Siduri rushed to the highest floor of the Divine Tower where Gilgamesh was in a slight panic. "King Lord Hyunryong, he, Idiot, of course this king saw it," Gilgamesh said disdainfully. Since Gilgamesh saw it, the Uruk citizens naturally saw it as well. "King, the citizens are very uneasy. Some of them have already lost their minds." Siduri calmed down and said. The citizens were uneasy because of the confrontation between Tiamat, who was the mother goddess, and Hyunryong, who was the direct descendant of Tiamat. The existence of the mother and son confronted each other. This rebellious battle of gods caused everyone's worldview to collapse slightly. Moreover, Tiamat's deterrence toward the ordinary people made the citizens even more fearful. That's why this king said that humans are foolish beyond compare. The battle of the gods is not something that humans can stop. They can only witness it and pray for it. Hyunryong is protecting this king's citizens. The foolish citizens should pray for Hyunryong and pray for Hyunryong's victory. Gilgamesh was even more disdainful now. After speaking to Siduri, Gilgamesh turned around and looked at Gorgon and Hyunryong. He did not say anything else. Siduri did not ask any more questions. She crossed her arms and began praying to Wu-Ming. "Lord Hyunryong, you must win." Shiro Amakusa, Fuma Kotaro, and Leonidas were trying their best to rush to Babylon. It would not be long before Babylon, which was within the range of the two great gods' attacks, would be affected. They had to evacuate the population as soon as possible. Is that Tiamat? What a terrifying avenger. Shiro Amakusa did not stop walking as he spoke seriously. Lord Hyunryong's body is also quite shocking. He's almost on par with Tiamat's body. It's truly astonishing. Leonidas praised from the side. Only Fuma Kotaro remained silent. However, his increased speed showed his respect for the two great gods. Let's speed up. Otherwise, the remaining citizens of Babylon will be finished. With that, the three of them increased their speed again. At this moment, Wuming and Tiamat began the second round of confrontation after the first battle. Chapter 406. In order to protect the vine barrier behind him and the city of Babylon, Wuming blocked all of Gorgon's attacks during the transformation process. Then Wuming completely revealed his true body. Wuming's body shouldn't be comparable to Gorgon's, but Wuming's magic power could not withstand Wuming's growth. The so-called dragon form was a noble artifact, but it was also a rider rank. Wuming's body could naturally catalyze it. Wuming catalyzed his dragon body to a size that, although not as large as Gorgon's, was enough to contend with him. Although it could accelerate the growth of his body, it was almost at its limit. If he continued to catalyze his body, his rider rank spirit base would shatter. Therefore Wuming chose to stop growing his body. Wuming knew that with his and Gorgon's figures, if they were to fight here, Babylon behind Wuming would definitely be affected. The north wall not far from Babylon was likely to collapse. I have to leave this place and move the battlefield to an uninhabited area in the north. Thinking of this, he opened his mouth and condensed his dragon breath. Hiss. Gorgon's torn snake head had regenerated. Countless snake heads opened their mouths like Wuming, condensing heat rays in their mouths. Accompanied by the dragon's roar, Wuming's dragon breath was condensed and sprayed towards Gorgon. Hiss. Countless snake heads were not to be outdone. They hissed and shot out rays from their mouths to meet Wuming's dragon breath. Hiss. The pure white dragon breath and the purple-black heat ray fought against each other, making a sizzling sound. There was neither an explosion nor any other reaction. It was as if the two forces were balanced. However, a mere monster was no match for a holy dragon. The holy dragon breath gradually suppressed the heat ray and pressed towards Gorgon. Damn it. Gorgon once again made a hoarse sound like an old bellows. Then the dragon breath hit Gorgon and knocked him to the ground. Boom. His snake hair billowed as Gorgon's huge body lay on the ground, causing another earthquake. Now. Wuming fiercely flapped his wings and flew into the sky with a large amount of gravel on the ground. After circling in the sky for a while, Wuming swooped down and grabbed Gorgon with his claws. It had to be said that a huge body brought great strength and endurance, but in terms of agility, it was a big disadvantage. At this moment, Gorgon was like this. Gorgon was knocked to the ground by Wuming's powerful dragon breath. But after all, Gorgon's endurance was super high. Because of the effect of the skill transformation magic, Gorgon's endurance had reached A++ level. Pure dragon breath could not harm Gorgon, so Wuming changed the dragon breath into an impact attack aimed at Gorgon's body and successfully knocked him to the ground. Although he had the same agility as Wuming, if Wuming's speed increased, Gorgon would not be able to react in time. The mysterious Lune rune wrapped around Wuming's huge dragon body. At this moment, Wuming's agility had surpassed rank A. Wuming successfully grabbed Gorgon before Gorgon could get up. However, Wuming did not want to harm him. Bang! Wuming's two huge dragon claws grabbed Gorgon's two hands. The Lune rune appeared again, and the strength of rank B instantly surpassed Gorgon. Wuming flew up with Gorgon. That's right, Wuming wanted to change the battlefield. However, in the face of a huge existence like Gorgon, it was not convenient to divert its attention. Therefore, Wuming chose to change the battlefield. He directly used his advantage as a flying dragon to grab Gorgon and fly. It had to be said that this was a bold and stupid method. How stupid! Gilgamesh looked at Wuming flying north and Wuming carrying Gorgon as he frowned and scolded. Not to mention whether Gorgon would attack Wuming in the air. Even if he carried Gorgon that weighed more than 10,000 pounds, Wuming's spirit base would not be able to handle it. No matter which one it was, the final battle after reaching the destination would be disadvantageous to Wuming. Lord Hyunryong. Siduri closed her eyes, no longer looking at the disappearing dragon figure, and silently prayed. It had to be said that Gilgamesh was right. In the sky, Wuming, who was flying north, was already being attacked by Gorgon. Although Gorgon's hands were grabbed by Wuming's dragon claws, Gorgon did not rely on its hands to attack. Gorgon glared angrily as countless snake hair tore at Wuming's body. Traces of blood flowed from Wuming's body. The blood dripped onto the ground, leaving a special mark. After all, this was Hyunryong's body, not the body of the origin dragon. Therefore, Gorgon with Tiamat's body could cause damage to Wuming. At this moment, if one looked carefully, one could see that there was a trace of electricity passing through Wuming's body, and a trace of gray appeared on the dragon's scales. That was the demon eye, a gemstone-gray demon eye of petrification that could petrify all enemies. After all, it was Medusa's cursed growth state, so it was normal for it to have the legendary Medusa's demon eye of petrification. Although Gorgon had used the magic eye on Wuming from the beginning, Wuming, who had A+ holy aura and A+ magic power ability, was extremely resistant to the magic eye of petrification, so the magic eye of petrification did not have much effect. Got to say, the demon eye of petrification was really a killer move. For example, Anna dealt with Demudo, and the demon eye of petrification had a fatal effect. However, it was somewhat useless to use it on Wuming. In this position, it's about time. Wuming ignored the damage on his body. After seeing that they were far enough away, Wuming let go of Gorgon's dragon claws. At the same time, Wuming widened his enormous dragon mouth, instantly condensed dragon breath, and sprayed it at the descending Gorgon. Boom! The dragon's breath hit Gorgon, who had fallen to the ground like a huge meteorite. There was a huge roar on the ground, causing a large amount of smoke and dust. The smoke was in the shape of a mushroom cloud, spreading and covering Gorgon's body. Wuming flew in the sky, relying on his strong durability and lune runes to recover himself. He looked at the mushroom cloud below sternly. And just as Wuming looked down solemnly, laser-like rays shot out crazily from the mushroom cloud at an extremely high frequency. Wuming waved his body to dodge. Because of the sudden arrival, one of the rays brushed past Wuming's wings. Sizzle! Wuming's wings emitted a sound as if they were being burned, producing carbonization and black smoke. It's different from the previous attack. Wuming frowned. Then the laser beam stopped, accompanied by a hurricane. Gorgon pushed away the smoke and stared at Wuming with scarlet eyes. As expected, you are an unstable factor that must be eliminated. Chapter 407. Sure enough, you are an unstable factor that must be eliminated. Gorgon spoke again, but this time her voice was not as hoarse as before, like a broken bellows, but a normal female voice. Wuming flapped his wings, landed on the ground from the sky, and looked at Gorgon quietly. Neither of them attacked again. In Wuming's view, since the other party spoke, then she must have something to say. Then are you going to destroy me? Just because you're a fake Tiamat? Or you see that you can't beat me, so you want to rope me in? Wuming mocked back disdainfully. It had to be said, if Tiamat was the real body, Wuming really couldn't beat her in his current state. However, if it was just the goddess Gorgon who had Tiamat's personality, Wuming wasn't afraid. So far, Gorgon had only shown one ability of Tiamat's personality, and that was 100 Beasts Mother Fetus, an ability that was used to produce magical beasts. If that was really the case, Wuming could solve the magical beast crisis now. Back to the main topic, Gorgon saw Wuming land and continued to speak. I don't want to be obsessed with Tiamat's identity, but since I was given Tiamat's divinity, then I have to replace her and do something that she couldn't do. Gorgon's snake hair swayed, unusually calm. Destroying the children that abandoned her, this was what Gorgon said she had to do. Don't tell me you don't have thoughts of revenge. Wuming continued. Through taking revenge on humans to express your anger of being betrayed and treated as a magical beast, isn't this the main reason why you came as an avenger, goddess Gorgon? Wuming mocked as if he saw through Gorgon. At first, the problem of Tiamat gave Wuming endless trouble, and Wuming kept thinking about this problem. It wasn't until Gorgon appeared that Wuming understood. Tiamat was indeed awakened, but for some reason, Tiamat refused to come to the modern world, and then Gorgon inherited Tiamat's divinity and was summoned as Tiamat. After all, although Tiamat was abandoned and exiled by her children, she was willing to do so. Therefore, Wuming could understand why Tiamat refused to appear in the modern world. Wuming wouldn't belittle this great maternal love, but Gorgon, who was given Tiamat's divinity as a fake Tiamat, made Wuming extremely disgusted. To be honest, Gorgon, I really hate you. I hate that you pretend to be Mother Tiamat. However, Wuming's words made Gorgon angry. Is that so? I originally wanted to cooperate with you, but it seems impossible. This was probably the reason why Gorgon spoke in a normal way in this uninhabited place. It was impossible from the beginning. I am Hyunryong, the Uruk Hyunryong who protects the world. Facing you who wants to destroy the human race, we can only fight. Wuming shook his head. However, I don't need your permission to cooperate with me. Gorgon smiled terrifyingly. Boom. The ground was instantly torn apart, and huge black pythons appeared from the ground under Wuming's feet without warning, instantly entangling Wuming. What? Wuming looked at these huge black pythons entangling him with some surprise. However, Wuming wasn't surprised by the attack, but by the power contained in these black pythons. Those were the power of the same origin as Wuming, the black snakes formed from origin, power. So that's how it is. If you are Tiamat, you can indeed use this power. Wuming said with relief. Wuming once had a dream where he heard Tiamat singing in a dark space where it was difficult to move. After dreaming of Tiamat, Wuming had been worried about the black origin soil in that space. Wuming didn't think that the black origin soil had nothing to do with Tiamat. And now Wuming was certain that Tiamat could use the black origin soil, and it wasn't strange that Gorgon, who had Tiamat's personality, could use the black origin soil. This is bad. Although Wuming said it was bad, his tone didn't sound bad at all. Be assimilated by the black soil and become my dependents. Gorgon laughed wildly. Tiamat's power, the Sea of Life. As long as someone was eroded by the black soil from the Sea of Life and dragged into the Sea of Life, they would definitely be assimilated by Tiamat and become a part of her. And these black snakes were an incomplete use of the Sea of Life. With Wuming's current ability, once he was dragged into the Sea of Life, his body-spirit base would definitely be assimilated, and he would become Tiamat's son again, the god closest to Tiamat. After all, with the black soil infused with the power of the origin, it could be said that there was nothing it couldn't control. However, if he wanted the power of the other party's origin, he had to use the power of the origin. And it just so happened that Wuming had the power of the origin. Boom! The power of the origin in Wuming's body erupted, instantly breaking through the black snake's bindings and scattering them. Then Wuming immediately flapped his wings and flew into the sky. It had to be said that Gorgon couldn't fly, which was one of Wuming's great advantages. To be able to break through the Sea of Life's bindings as expected of Hyunryong. Gorgon was slightly surprised. After all, in the knowledge he had been given, this was the first time an existence had been able to break free from the Sea of Life despite being bound. However, since you chose to break free from the bindings, it means that the Sea of Life still has an effect on you. In that case, we just need to increase the amount. As Gorgon spoke, he raised his hands and his snake hair danced. Giant black snakes appeared from the ground, looking at Wuming in the sky. This is rather similar to Athena. Wuming looked at Gorgon controlling the black snakes and thought of Athena in the Godslayer world. Athena used her own dark energy to form black snakes to attack. Athena. Gorgon's face was filled with anger. After all, according to the legends, Medusa was cursed by Athena, and then turned into a demon, devouring her two sisters and becoming Gorgon. Gorgon was naturally furious at Athena. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Countless black snakes rushed toward Wuming in the sky, and Gorgon released divine heat rays on the ground. Wuming was facing a formidable enemy. He tried his best to dodge the heat rays and the black snakes, and from time to time he used dragon breath to attack the black snakes and Gorgon. The dragon breath could destroy these black snakes, but every time Wuming attacked Gorgon, there would always be black snakes appearing to help Gorgon block Wuming's attacks. Seeing this, Wuming's heart sank. This is really bad. Chapter 408. Wuming, who had transformed into a Hyunryong dragon, was unprecedentedly powerful in terms of physical strength and magic. After all, the Uruk Hyunryong was Gilgamesh's teacher. However, after using the Sea of Life, Wuming would not choose to fight Gorgon in close combat. After all, there were too many black snakes and it seemed like there was no limit. These black snakes were not enough to corrode Wuming, but if there were too many of them, Wuming would not be able to move and would be at the mercy of others. It was like the relationship between water and fire. The black snakes were fire and Wuming was water. Fire could not envelop water, so the black snakes could not bind Wuming. However, if there was enough fire, the water would be evaporated, leaving nothing behind. In simple terms, if Wuming was really injected into the Sea of Life, then he would definitely be forced to leave. However, Wuming's spirit base would be recorded by the Sea of Life, and more Hyunryong would be produced. That would be terrible. Therefore, Wuming could only choose to capture the leader and kill Gorgon first. Then he would need to attack from afar. However, Wuming's long-range attacks were useless. Whether it was his own dragon breath or the loon's magic attacks, they would all be blocked by the black snakes. Gorgon also knew that Wuming would choose to attack him. Gorgon would not let Wuming's plan succeed. There were more than 10 black snakes around him, and once they were reduced they would immediately replace them. Then there was only one way left. Kill all the black snakes around Gorgon, then kill Gorgon and force him to leave. Wuming's huge eyes emitted a cold gaze. Wuming had considered killing both the black serpent and Gorgon, but killing Gorgon with the black serpent as a shield would be difficult. Gorgon's durability was A++. To put it simply, it wasn't easy to die. But now it was surrounded by black snakes that were both spears and shields. The difficulty was simply too great. However, Wuming had an idea. "I'm going Gorgon." Wuming roared as he charged at Gorgon. Countless black snakes rushed towards Wuming from all directions, including countless heat rays that could cause true damage to Wuming. The attacking black snakes had to be destroyed. After all, those things were quite difficult to deal with. As for the heat rays, he would try his best to dodge as many as possible. If he couldn't dodge them, he could only defend against them, even though he couldn't defend against them. Wuming kept dodging one heat ray after another, destroying one black snake after another. His body was getting smaller and smaller. Of course, this was Wuming's intention. After all, moving forward with so many attacks, it was still advantageous to be small. However, Wuming didn't dare to change back to his human form. Not only would all his ability points drop by 1 level, but without the protection of the dragon's scales, Wuming's defense would also be greatly weakened. Although Wuming had almost given up on defending. When he was very close to Gorgon, Wuming's body had shrunk to his initial size. Compared to Gorgon, he was almost a quarter of Gorgon's height. "You're giving up? Are you prepared to walk into a trap, Hyunryong?" Gorgon said mockingly. Although that was what he said, Gorgon didn't think that Hyunryong would commit suicide. He must have some plan. Gorgon instantly controlled countless black snakes to surround Wuming and rushed towards him. "That's good. What a coincidence. I said I was going to commit suicide." Wuming smiled. Then the loon runes on his body lit up. That was the original 18th loon. Okyuji Odin. "How dare you?" In an instant, with the release of the noble phantasm real name, and Gorgon's surprised voice, Gorgon and Wuming's eyes fell into a white light. Rumble? In the distance, Uruk. Gilgamesh looked at a 7-colored energy pillar that rose into the sky and smiled. What a pleasant battle. This time Gorgon lost. In front of Babylon, the vine barrier. Woo-woo, Funbaba looked at the 7-colored light pillar worriedly. Funbaba, who had a connection with his master, could sense that his master was in a bad situation. Babylon City, Nippur City. A few servants who were nervously moving the crowd between the two cities also saw the 7-colored light pillar and were stunned. Not only that, but the citizens who wanted to take advantage of the time when Wuming took Gorgon away were also stunned. They stared blankly at the scene. As expected of Hyunryong-sama, he can actually do this. Shiro Amakusa praised. In the 7-colored light pillar, a huge source of power was the main body. The power of fire and frost complemented each other. The heavy earth and the light wind complemented each other. It was rare that the active life and the silent death did not corrode each other. This was the real great god seal. It gathered all the power of the loon runes that Odin sacrificed one of his eyes. It was reproduced in Mesopotamia by Hyunryong, who replaced the Uruk. As for the problem of the noble phantasm, because Okdu Odin was a magic spell on the level of a noble phantasm, there was no reason why Silent Moon, who could use all the runes of Rune, would not be able to use it. After all, Wuming was not a servant that could be judged by the normal servant rules. "Ah!" Gorgon's scream came from the light pillar. After a while, the 7-colored light pillar disappeared. The smoke produced by the great god seal almost covered the entire northern battlefield, making it impossible to see the battlefield clearly. The great god seal, which contained the source of power, destroyed all the black snakes, including the black snakes beside Gorgon. Gorgon was naturally not left behind. He was burned by the great god seal. The powerful great god seal had an effect on Gorgon. At this moment, Gorgon's snake hair was destroyed. His scales were falling off. There was not a single part of his body that was intact. Blood was spurting out. Gorgon's huge snake tail was lying on the ground powerlessly. He was also weakly supporting himself on the ground with his hands. Gorgon, who used the Sea of Life's authority, also had the aura of the black mud in his body. Wu Ming's source of power that restrained each other was contained in the great god's seal. There was no doubt that Gorgon's foundation was damaged. If it wasn't for the fact that it had a durability of A++, and that Gorgon was at the edge of the attack of the Akdu Odin, Gorgon would have disappeared in the colorful light just now. That guy, is he crazy? Gorgon panted slightly and sighed. The reason why Gorgon said that was because of the power of this move. Yes, Gorgon's foundation was damaged and he was about to die. However, what would happen to Wu Ming, who had imprinted the origin of the 18 Lune on his body and detonated it? Without a doubt, the answer would be to leave. This was also something that Gorgon did not expect. Wu Ming would risk the consequences of leaving to detonate himself and die together with him. Yura Hyunryong, I admit that you won this time. Gorgon closed his eyes and said lightly. However, your plan did not succeed. Even if you hurt me like this, give me a few months and I will be able to recover. Without the Uruk, you can only wait to die. Gorgon suddenly opened his eyes. A scarlet light flashed. I'm sorry, I haven't left yet. A voice came from the surrounding smoke. Then, a golden chain wrapped around Gorgon's neck and pulled him to the ground. Chapter 409. How is this possible? How did you survive that level of explosion? Gorgon lay weakly on the ground, his tone was abnormally terrified. After all, even without the power of origin, the Akdug Odin that had been planned for a long time was enough to blast Gorgon half to death. And how could Wu Ming be fine in the center of such an explosion? You're right, I couldn't have survived the explosion just now. Wu Ming said lightly, then walked out of the smoke and dust to Gorgon. The moment Gorgon saw Wu Ming, he was relieved. Wu Ming had already returned to his human form from his dragon form, and seemed to be fine. However, that was only possible if one ignored Wu Ming's transparent body and the Holy Grail that was exposed in his heart. Caught the power of the Holy Grail and barely survived. Gorgon grabbed the golden chains that bound him. At this moment, Gorgon looked extremely weak, and after a few movements he gave up. Wu Ming, who should have left, didn't. That was because he caught the power of the Holy Grail and forced himself to stay here. But looking at Wu Ming's appearance, he probably wouldn't even last a minute before leaving. A minute was very short, so short that Gorgon couldn't hold on, but a minute was also very long, so long that Wu Ming could kill the weak Gorgon in a minute. The current Gorgon was at the end of the light crossbow. No, perhaps not even at the end of the light crossbow. Even if Wu Ming was about to disappear, Wu Ming's current state could be said to be the final radiance of the setting sun. It should be known that the final radiance of the setting sun was everyone's strongest moment. In this short period of less than a minute, it was enough for Wu Ming to kill Gorgon. As expected, this is the end of my road. Gorgon gave up struggling. Like a curse, being suppressed by heroes, this was the unchanging end of the path for demons. You don't have to be like this, Gorgon. Wu Ming looked at Gorgon and shook his head. There's no need for you to play the role of Tiamat. You're Gorgon, no one else. How can you win if you run away and deny yourself? I hate people like you who run away. Wu Ming explained why he hated Gorgon so much. Is that so? I see. Gorgon finally understood before he died. Wu Ming looked at his body. It would disappear in a few seconds. I don't have much time left. Since you've already understood, then go in peace. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he raised his left hand that was not holding the chain. His left hand instantly transformed, and an incomparably huge dragon claw appeared. This was the effect of Wu Ming's noble phantasm. The claw that was condensed with magic power clawed at Gorgon's chest, where the spirit core was located. However, just like in dramas, as long as the opponent was given an explanation before he died, he would definitely lose. Just as Wu Ming's huge dragon claw was about to pierce Gorgon's heart, the silver chain instantly wrapped around Wu Ming's dragon claw and Wu Ming's body. Mother, are you all right? Enkidu suddenly appeared and shouted nervously. You're in luck, Gorgon. Wu Ming's body began to disappear from his feet. The golden heavenly lock that was binding Gorgon also turned into light spots and disappeared. Ah, that's right. I have an underling who cares about my mother. Gorgon was no longer obsessed with Tiamat's identity. Gorgon slowly got up and looked indifferently at Wu Ming, who was about to disappear. Enkidu did not know why, but he also looked at Wu Ming. Through his eyes, Wu Ming could see that he did not have the heart to do so. You've won this battle. In the following days, I won't come out of my temple in the north until I fully recover. Wu Ming pursed his lips helplessly. Gorgon would not be able to recover from the damage caused by this battle without a few months. If she dared to show up, she would be attacked by the other servants. If Gorgon was seriously injured, the servants summoned by Gilgamesh would be able to kill her. I will only send out monsters. I will not appear in person. Consider it your reward for winning. After all, Gorgon had her dignity. She would restrain herself if she lost. However, the one who died was not her, but the winner, Wuming. Therefore, Gorgon would not give up on invading the Uruk. As you wish, Wuming said indifferently. After Wuming finished, Gorgon left toward the north, leaving Wuming's head and Enkidu's head behind. Looking at Enkidu, who did not leave, Wuming opened his mouth. Although I don't know who you are, I can see that you are not a bad person. It's just that your standpoint is different. Wuming smiled at Enkidu. Enkidu was somewhat flustered and blushed. If it's possible, I hope that you can take care of this holy grail. Wuming finished speaking and completely disappeared. Clang. The holy grail that was located at Wuming's heart fell to the ground. Enkidu thought for a moment, then walked to the place where Wuming disappeared, picked up the holy grail, and left. The city of Babylon and the city of Nippur were in the midst of population transfer overnight. Because of the commotion caused by Wuming and Tiamat, people were not in the mood to sleep. Coupled with the monster crisis, people were constantly moving people under the arrangement of the servants. Because the monster horde and Gorgon attacked in the middle of the night, it was almost a few hours before the battle between Wuming and Gorgon ended. Shiro Amakusa stood on a tall building in the city of Babylon, which had almost completed its population migration, and looked at the battlefield where Wuming and Gorgon had settled down in the distance, and did not speak for a long time. Did Hyunryong win? Leonidas appeared behind Shiro Amakusa and asked Shiro Amakusa. Shiro Amakusa nodded and then shook his head. Hyunryong won, but he also left. Gorgon lost, but he is still alive. This was what Fuma Kotaro said after collecting information. In fact, in the current situation, Wuming undoubtedly lost. Now, almost all the servants who saw Gorgon's real body knew that it was not Tiamat who gave birth to the monster, but Gorgon who got Tiamat's personality. Let's go, the north wall is almost finished. It's time to retreat. Then the three of them left Babylon. Nippur was the same. After Okita Soki and Ba Guzan finished guiding the residents of Nippur, they looked into the distance. Hyunryong-sama failed. Okita Soki said in a low voice. However, knowing that Tiamat is actually Gorgon is quite important. Hyunryong-sama's sacrifice was not in vain. Ba Guzan said firmly. Let's go, it's time to return to the north wall. Uruk Tower of God. Siduri stood unnaturally beside Gilgamesh, assisting Gilgamesh in handling government affairs. It's almost time to recover, Siduri? Gilgamesh suddenly said. Yes. I'm sorry, King Gilgamesh. Siduri said apologetically. Hyunryong is not dead. It's just a clone that died. Gorgon was seriously injured. Now we have the advantage, so cheer up. Gilgamesh reprimanded. Yes, King Gilgamesh. It's just that I don't know where the Holy Grail is, I have to find it as soon as possible. Gilgamesh said to himself. Then the sun rose. A new morning sun. Gilgamesh did not know what he was referring to. Looking at the rising sun, Siduri's heart was also active. Hyunryong had done a lot for Mesopotamia, and the rest was left to them. Inside the root, the huge root dragon opened its eyes. Chapter 410. Within the root, Wuming opened his eyes. I forgot about the variable using Enkidu's body. The Heaven Lock is very effective against me. After all, Wuming's Rider-class clone had extremely high divinity. Even if he had used brute force to break free, Wuming's spirit base would have been destroyed. I'm sorry, Lord Wuming, I didn't help. Enkidu's voice sounded. Wuming looked at the chain on his arm. Of course not, little Enkidu. Didn't you win effortlessly against the Quetzalcoatl? As for the end, you were focused on restraining Gorgon, so it's understandable that you didn't notice the other Heaven Lock coming. After all, an injured beast was the scariest. It was hard to guarantee that Gorgon wouldn't recover before death. That was why Enkidu had used all his strength to restrain Gorgon and didn't use another chain to deal with the other Heaven Lock. Also, we've done enough. Let's leave the rest to Gil and the others. Don't forget that Tachika and the others are also working hard. Don't worry too much. Wuming laughed like an optimist. Looking at Wuming like this, Enkidu felt a little helpless, but he didn't say anything. As long as you're happy, Lord Wuming. Enkidu's tone was light. As long as Lord Wuming didn't feel like he was a burden, it was fine. At this moment, Wuming, who was inside the root, sensed something outside. Did those guys become active because of the influence I caused in Mesopotamia? Wuming opened a lens in front of him and countless black substances rushed over. Naturally, it was the root black soil that was attacking from outside. But if they only rely on numbers, they're like moths to a flame. How strong was Wuming now? Before coming to the origin, Wuming was no longer afraid of the origin black soil. Now Wuming had stayed in the origin for quite some time. For Wuming, who could absorb the power of origins to strengthen himself, being inside a great origin was the same as entering a device that could endlessly increase his strength. Wuming sat on the platform at the center of the great source and closed his eyes. In an instant, a blinding white light shot out from Wuming's body, penetrating the origin as if it was nothing. The white light penetrated the origin and went outside. Like the exterior of the universe's great origin, countless pieces of black mud surged forward one after another, like the surface of an ocean in the midst of a storm. However, when the pure white light came into contact with the source of the black mud was like a flame that had come into contact with water and was instantly extinguished. Countless black origin mud were constantly swallowed and destroyed by the pure white light. However, the black origin mud seemed to know no fear and continued to surge forward. It didn't take long for the surging black mud outside the great origin to be completely destroyed. The space outside the great origin regained its mystery and tranquility like the universe. I have to say, if the black origin mud had attacked me while my consciousness was shifting to the servant's clone, the defensive device I set up would have been useless. Then Wuming looked at the back of his dragon claw, which had a black dragon-shaped imprint on it. Crackle crackle, a bolt of lightning streaked across the back of Wuming's dragon claw and erased the black dragon-shaped imprint. Wuming had already memorized the world coordinates of the singularity, so he no longer needed the black imprint. The black dragon-shaped imprint was also responsible for the black origin mud's attack, which was why Wuming chose to dispel it. In that case, Kalas, stay behind and help me manage these defensive tactics, in case those things attack me again while I'm asleep. If a large amount of black origin mud attacked here while Wuming's consciousness was in the servant's clone, it would be really troublesome. If he chose to stay behind to solve the problem, it was very likely that the great origin would be attacked, and Wuming's foundation would be affected. After all, Wuming still needed the power of the great origin to grow. If Wuming decisively dispelled the servant's clone, the great origin would be saved, but the problem in the servant's world would not be solved, which would be terrible. In other words, if Tachika Fujimaru was in a life-threatening situation, only Wuming could save her. What should he do if the great origin was attacked by the black origin mud? Wuming couldn't make the decision to abandon Tachika Fujimaru, but he had to ensure that the great origin was absolutely safe, which made him very conflicted. Because of that, if Kalas stayed behind and controlled the defensive tactics, Wuming would be able to safely carry out his tasks in another world. Understood, Master. Kalas indifferently replied. Kalas naturally understood this principle, so she immediately agreed. Kalas flew down from Wuming's head, turned into a machine that acted like a central device, and landed inside the great origin, on the platform that Wuming was lying on. The platform was very large and Wuming's shrunken body didn't take up much space. I will help Master guard the house. A screen appeared on the device, displaying what looked like an electrocardiogram. As Kalas spoke, the electrocardiogram began to jump. Even if she didn't understand, she had to accept it. Solving problems for her master was her duty as the master's magic attire. Well then, Enkidu will continue to follow me this time. Wuming then said to the chain on his dragon arm. Yes. Enkidu said excitedly. Pfft. Kalas spat out in displeasure. After a while, the shadow of a dragon left the great origin. But don't misunderstand, that wasn't Wuming's main body. Wuming's main body was sleeping inside the great origin. The shadow of the dragon that flew out of the great origin was a true clone created by Wuming. After all, the body of a servant was still a bit weak. It would be fine if it was a powerful class, but Wuming always became a class that was disadvantageous to him for various reasons. Therefore, Wuming created a true clone of himself. Using the power of the great origin, relying on Wuming's wisdom and Wuming's own body as the blueprint, he created the Origin Dragon mini-machine. Just like the male version of the Gilgamesh doll made by Wuming, he put his consciousness into it and transferred his consciousness into it. Although this Origin Dragon mini-machine was a puppet, it was closer to the servant's spiritual base. After all, it was a product of the Great Origin. How could it be like an ordinary puppet? That was why Wuming completely put his consciousness into it. This Origin Dragon mini-machine had all the abilities of Wuming's main body. However, whether it was the Sword of Salvation, the 12 incarnations, or the Origin Dragon's characteristics, this body could use them all. However, no matter what ability it was, its power was reduced a lot, but it was still better than a simple servant's body. Wuming was going to use this body to go to the singularity where Tachika and the others were now and help them break through all the singularities as soon as possible. After all, this was a disaster that endangered Ilya world, and it was better to solve it as soon as possible. Wuming came to the long-lost space-time tunnel, and controlled his body to wander inside. Just as Wuming was about to enter the singularity where Tachika was, Wuming heard a voice. God-sama, if there is a God-sama among humans, why didn't he show up to save us? This sentence contained many emotions: hatred, hope, numbness. Wuming was attracted by these emotions, stopped moving, and thought, is this the strong longing of other worlds received by my body? Wuming thought for a while, then gave up entering Tachika's world, and turned to the place where the voice came from. Interesting. Hating the gods yet hoping for the gods? What kind of world is this? Let me take a look. Wuming opened the space-time portal of that world and went in. Chapter 4:11. The sky was dark and gloomy. Endless thick fog and dark clouds covered the sky, and not a single ray of sunlight shone on the earth. The land was desolate. It was either cracked land or land full of strange plants. In short, it was a tragic sight that was unbearable to look at. It was desolate everywhere. Disgusting. This was the sigh of the white dragon that had just come out of the space-time tunnel. Wuming could feel that everywhere was filled with dead silence. The land had lost its vitality, the sea had dried up, the sky was covered, and the air was filled with an unpleasant smell. All of this was nauseating. Wuming flew in the sky, looking at the world that looked like the end of the world, and fell into deep thought. Wuming did not need to visually estimate. Through the attributes of the atmosphere and the current state of the earth, Wuming could tell that the entire world was probably covered in dark clouds and smoke. No wonder there was such a sad sigh. It would be strange not to be sad living in such a world. Wuming shook his head. I'm afraid it's an unknown world. I'd better use some concealment tactics on myself first. With these thoughts, Wuming mobilized magic power, and then he found that there was no magic power in this world, but there was another kind of energy. Not magic power? This is really interesting. Wuming laughed. The worlds that Wuming had been to before were all worlds with magic power, but this world did not have magic power, but another special power which attracted Wuming's attention. However, this is not difficult for me. Several tactics appeared and covered Wuming's body. The tactic that blocked detection was successfully used by Wuming. Then Wuming looked around, found a place to land, and flew over. Boom! In a natural cave, a ball of white flame burst out from inside. Plop! A huge corpse that looked like a multi-legged centipede fell to the ground, then turned into dust and collapsed. Really, why is there danger everywhere? Is there no safe place in this world? Wuming's voice was heard. Wuming extinguished the flame on his hand and walked into the cave. At this moment, Wuming was wearing a black hooded cloak. After entering the cave, Wuming took off the hood and then looked around the cave. I have to say, this giant centipede is really neat. I was thinking if it was like that tentacle-like thing's place was full of mucus, or if it was like that bear-like thing's cave was full of feces and skeletons, then I'd have to change places again. Wuming said with some relief. Then Wuming sat down in the cave. As for why Wuming came back here, it had to start from the moment he landed. After Wuming landed, he recovered his human form. After all, it was a weakened version of the power of the root, so it was natural that he could turn into a human. Then Wuming began to look for a place to rest. After a few twists and turns, he finally found a decent place. During this process, Wuming discovered that there were things that Wuming didn't know about almost everywhere on the ground. Poisonous flowers, black dust that could corrode flesh, an atmosphere that made it difficult for living creatures to survive, and various monsters. At the thought of those things, Wuming had a headache. If humans can survive here, we'll be thankful to the heavens and earth. As for why Wuming could use magic in this world without magic. After all, Wuming was a dragon of the root, a noble and mysterious existence born from the root. And all worlds were born from the root, so it wasn't hard to understand why Wuming could use the energy of other worlds. This power is quite interesting. As he said that, Wuming extended a finger. specks of golden light appeared on Wuming's hand, and slowly condensed into a ball of light. Wuming controlled the ball of light to move, and then returned to his finger. Energy with life, how interesting. Wuming dispelled the ball of light, and the ball of light turned into energy and dissipated in the air. As the name implied, these energies had life but they wouldn't die. After these energies were used up, they would come to the atmosphere, and become part of the atmosphere's energy. Let's not talk about that for now. In such an environment, can humans really survive? Wuming sighed. After all, the environment of this world was a little too harsh. However, regarding whether or not there were humans, Wuming only expressed his opinion with a sigh. There must be humans alive. Putting aside the fact that Wuming was attracted by a certain human's words, humans weren't creatures that would perish easily. But if that's all, how could humans be forced to this point? Wuming said, somewhat puzzled. If it was really only the threat that Wuming saw just now, then with the wisdom of humans, Wuming didn't believe that they couldn't deal with it. And at that moment there was a roar. Boom, boom. The cave Wuming was in was directly buried, and Wuming was buried alive. Outside, a huge dragon was flying, facing off against a group of beings that looked like robots. The robots that looked like humans flew in the sky as if they were on standby, waiting for the dragon to attack. Roar. The dragon roared at the group of beings that looked like robots, and then a dragon's breath condensed in its mouth. Boom! The dragon's breath exploded at the robots, making a huge roar. That's right. It seemed like this was the culprit that caused the cave to collapse and bury Wuming. The powerful dragon's breath shot at the group of flying robots. No matter how one looked at it, these robots couldn't possibly withstand it. However, these robots moved. A circular magical formation was cast by many robots, blocking in front of these robots. Then the dragon's breath sprayed on this translucent magical formation. Immediately after, the dragon's breath was easily diverted by the magical formation like a ray of light shining on a mirror. An incomparably terrifying dragon's breath swept across the surrounding area, causing a series of explosions. Boom. Yes, I'm afraid that the dragon's breath will attack the cave Wuming is in. These robots will be helpful, too. Roar. As if seeing that its attack was diverted, the dragon roared angrily. Damn it! You bunch of scrap metal! A huge roar came from the dragon's mouth. Attack refraction complete. Target confirmed. Dragon spirit, begin annihilation. The robot flying at the front of the group of robots was like a leader, muttering. The robots stretched out their hands and magical formations appeared from their hands as if they were ready to annihilate the so-called dragon spirit in front of them. The leader robot spoke. Pseudo-cannon. At that moment, Wuming's voice was heard. I see. It's because of your existence that humans can't survive. Chapter 412. Who's there? The giant dragon looked around and roared vigilantly. The robots that were ready to attack also stopped moving and waited while scanning the surroundings. Just a traveler, don't worry about it. A voice suddenly came from the middle of the dragon and robots, and Wuming's figure appeared there. What? When did you appear? I didn't even notice you? The giant dragon said in surprise. In his perception, the place where Wuming was located did not have the slightest energy fluctuation. It was like a mass of air. This was the effect of Wuming's shielding technique. Not only was there the magic of Yggdrasil, World Tree, but there was also the magic of Loon magic. The auxiliary magic of Yggdrasil, World Tree, was quite powerful. Without special skills or tools, it was impossible to detect it. Although the robots didn't look surprised, judging from the weapons they raised, these robots were also very vigilant. Scanning. There is no information about this person in the database. Unable to determine his race. Temporarily determined to be an unknown species. Current status unknown, suspected to be hostile, the robot leader said in a cold tone. Forget about this group of Kikai species. Which race are you from? Do you want to poke your nose into my business? The giant dragon said in a rather irritable tone. Because it could not see the details of the enemy, it was even more irritable since it was already released from prison. Even the robots with the database could not find out Wuming's identity, let alone this giant dragon. Is this world divided into forces by race? The two sides are called dragon and Kikai species. Wuming looked at the giant dragon, then looked at the robots. Through the information exchanged between the two sides, Wuming also understood their race. The giant dragon was the dragon and the robots were called Kikai species. It was a very appropriate and simple name. Do you think I wanted to? I was obediently waiting in the cave over there. You guys buried me with an explosion, so I had no choice but to come. Wu Ming pointed at the cave that had turned into a pile of rubble and said helplessly. Speaking of which, I need some information. I wonder who can provide it to me. Just treat it as an apology. Wu Ming maintained his smile as he looked at the giant dragon and Kikai, waiting for their reply. This group has no reason to provide you with information. This group refuses, said the leader of the mechas. Even so, the group of mechas didn't make any other moves. They only maintained their defensive stance. However, for these Kikai species, as long as they didn't attack them, they wouldn't retaliate. However, to the arrogant and hot-tempered dragon elite, the colossal dragon elite, who thought highly of themselves and had to hand over information just because they provoked them, the colossal dragon elite thought, "Who are you? Do you want to die? If you want information, you'll have to survive my attacks first," roared the colossal dragon. Then, it opened its mouth and countless energy that was different from magic power gathered in it. Then it shot it at Wu Ming. The scorching dragon's breath was shot at Wu Ming. The surrounding air had begun to distort due to the high temperature. Perhaps even steel would be melted by the dragon's breath. To be able to defend and reflect this attack, it seems that these Kikai species are not to be trifled with. Wu Ming looked at the Kikai species that didn't move and thought in his heart. Then Wu Ming looked at the attack that was coming at him. However, in the face of such a powerful attack, Wu Ming didn't do anything. Boom. There was a big explosion at Wu Ming's position. Because the speed of this attack was really, to Wu Ming, too slow. Wu Ming's voice came from behind the colossal dragon. What? How is that possible? The colossal dragon was in disbelief. Although the Kikai species' faces didn't change much, their eyes that were constantly producing data also exposed their inner situation. This was the effect caused by Wu Ming using the Phoenix incarnation that was activated in an instant to teleport. However, because the body wasn't the original body, the duration of the Phoenix incarnation was reduced to 1 second. However, 1 second was enough for Wu Ming. Then it's my turn. Wu Ming smiled slightly and then began to chant. Seeing Wu Ming chanting, the colossal dragon was very disdainful. For the dragon spirit race that had extremely high magic resistance, if it wasn't the forest spirit race that was best at using magic, there was no need to pay attention to other people's magic. But, I am the strongest and the one who holds all victory in my hands. No matter if it's a human or a devil, I will defeat any enemy that stands in my way. Seeing Wu Ming, who was just chanting, the colossal dragon felt a sense of crisis. It can cause me harm? And when Wu Ming finished chanting, the colossal dragon felt that something was wrong. I must stop him. The colossal dragon's inner alarm bell rang. When Wu Ming was chanting, the colossal dragon attacked. Die. The colossal dragon roared and turned around to wave its giant claws at Wu Ming. For the dragon spirit race that had extremely high physical fitness, in addition to using magic, its physical strength was also super strong. Except for a few races, almost no one of the races could take a claw from the dragon spirit race. However, when the dragon spirit race swung its claws at Wu Ming raised his fist that was quite young for the colossal dragon. However, it was this hand that gave the colossal dragon an even more incomparably dangerous feeling. Because this body was weakened, Wu Ming was prepared to add a strengthening spell. You have shining yellow? Well, forget it. It would be troublesome if I accidentally killed you. However, after thinking for a while, Wu Ming stopped the strengthening spell. Just like Wu Ming said, it would be troublesome if he killed it directly. Wu Ming still needed information. Wu Ming's words naturally reached the colossal dragon's ears, but this made the colossal dragon even angrier. The colossal dragon swung its claws even faster. Then the colossal dragon's claws collided with Wu Ming's fist. Generally speaking, when a huge figure that was hundreds of meters tall faced a weakling that was less than 2 meters tall, the weaker side would lose. However, Wu Ming wasn't a weakling, but a super strong one. Boom! The colossal dragon that collided with Wu Ming's fist was slammed into the ground, leaving a dragon-shaped groove on the ground full of gravel. How is this possible? The colossal dragon that fell into the groove of the ground, its bones were broken, some were even shattered, and it was almost unable to move. It said slowly in an unbelievable tone. Then the colossal dragon fainted. The unknown new species has a few powerful brute force. It is not recommended to face it head-on. Temporarily retreat. The leader of the mech armors analyzed and said. Then, a diamond-shaped space opened behind these mech armors, and the mech armors began to retreat. Did I say you can go again? Chapter 413. Did I say that I would let you go again? Wu Ming's voice rang out. However, this did not affect the departure of the Jikai bastards. There's no fear at all, Wu Ming said gloomily. He didn't feel any fear from Jikai. However, I can't just let you leave like this. Since they were called the Mekai species, they must have something like a database. For Wu Ming, who wanted information, this was like finding a water source in the desert. He couldn't let it go. Well, but I don't need that many mecha seeds. As the leader, you're pretty good. After all, the leader usually had the most information, right? Little n. After saying that, Wu Ming cast Heaven Lock on leader Kikai, who had already entered the dimensional space. Bang. However, the Heaven Lock that had just entered bounced back out. What? Wu Ming was a little surprised. Although Heaven Lock was not an offensive weapon, this was the first time Enkidu had failed to achieve anything. Putting away Heaven Lock, Wu Ming looked at the closed dimensional space and gave up on the idea of capturing leader Kikai. Perhaps the performance of the machines was different. Compared to the leader of the mechanical triumphant race, which had already closed its dimensional gate, there were a few mechanical triumphant races which had yet to close their dimensional gates. Looking at the speed at which they closed the dimensional door, this was more than enough for Wu Ming. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you a curse. Evil people can't hit me. After quickly chanting the incantation, Wu Ming instantly arrived in front of a randomly selected Mecha Triumph-type dimensional door and went in. Pseudo-reflex, pseudo-reflex. Accompanied by the emotionless robotic lowly voice, a barrier appeared in front of Wu Ming, who had just entered the dimensional door. When Wu Ming saw this barrier, he understood that the mechanical triumphant race could use a kind of reflex ability. Enkidu was caught off guard by the mechanical triumphant race's reflective barrier just now. But, you're still too young to deal with me. Wu Ming's Phoenix avatar didn't simply increase Wu Ming's speed, but it reduced the flow of time around him and accelerated his own time to reach super high speed. This involved the power of time. In this way, not only Wu Ming's physical speed, but also Wu Ming's consciousness and reaction ability. As a result, Wu Ming easily bypassed the barrier amidst his opponent's extremely slow movements. With a wave of his hand, the heavenly lock appeared and bound this mecha triumphant race. Then, Wu Ming accelerated and pulled the mechanical triumphant race out of the dimensional door. Wu Ming looked at the rest of the mechanical triumphant race that had been completely sealed and retreated, and he didn't say anything. Well, even if it's an ordinary mechanical triumphant race, I'm already satisfied to know the basic information of this world. Then Wu Ming looked at the mechanical triumphant race that was tied up by him. Because of the mechanical triumphant race being tied up by the mechanical triumphant race, it could no longer use its magical power to fight back, and the power of a mechanical triumphant race alone was not enough to break free from the mechanical triumphant race. It was a female mechanical triumphant race, and it was a lowly of about 10 years old. A small part of its body was covered by metal armor, from neck to chest, the entire lower abdomen, and below thighs were all mechanical metal, and a large number of mechanical metal structures were exposed in the elbows, shoulders, waist, and abdomen. There were several mechanical wings behind it, which didn't look like they were used to assist in flight, but more like combat support. There was a rather complicated mechanical intelligence disc on the right side of its head, which looked quite mysterious. Its eyes were yellow in alert mode full of data, and there was an analytical lens in front of its left eye. There was also a long-barreled technology gun for combat on its arm, as well as some other auxiliary machinery. After all, Wu Ming didn't know much about these things and he didn't pay much attention to them. In addition, there were two tail-like cables behind the mechanical triumphant race's body, which gave Wu Ming the feeling of an antenna. The most obvious thing was the gorgeous rose-colored knee-length hair of this mechanical triumphant race, as well as its beautiful face. Although her messy long hair looked quite unkempt, it gave people a very soft feeling. Wu Ming touched the mechanical triumphant race's hair and sure enough, it was quite soft, but the toughness of the mechanical triumphant race's hair was super strong. Soft steel wire can be compared to this. Prompt: the connection has been cut off from this machine, you can't invade the connection through this machine. The mechanical triumphant race said. Sure enough, it's worthy of being a machine life, it was abandoned after being captured. Wu Ming said helplessly. But there was nothing he could do about it. According to reason, it was just an ordinary mechanical triumphant race member. He was afraid that the other party wouldn't choose to fight against an unknown enemy who could knock out a dragon spirit with one punch. Often, a program machine system was the most rational existence. I can only say that it's worthy of being called a mechanical triumphant race. Wu Ming sighed. I received an order when I was cut off from the host computer to initiate the self-destruction program. I can't leave any information to the enemy. The self-destruction program, countdown, start dash, the mechanical triumphant race slowly said blankly, and then began to mumble. However, although Kikai was a robot, it was actually a product of mystery. To put it simply, it was not a science, it was still a magic. Question: the self-destruction program can't be started, the elf can't be used, the self-destruction program failed to start. Mechanical triumphant race said faintly. Of course. Your body's energy has already been restrained. How can you use your ability? Wu Ming couldn't let the database that he had worked so hard to obtain run away. I repeat, I will not provide you with any information. Mechanical triumphant race looked at Wu Ming indifferently and did not do anything else. With such a tough attitude, it's impossible to get any information. After all, no matter how hard you torture a machine, it would only make others think that you're destroying her, which had nothing to do with the abandoned mechanical triumphant race. Collis is not here, it's a bit inconvenient. After all, Collis was similar to mechanical triumphant race, but Collis was not as emotionless as mechanical triumphant race. Since being tough didn't work, Wu Ming didn't force it. After all, there was still someone over there who could get information. With that in mind, Wu Ming looked at the unconscious dragon over there. Then, Wu Ming said to the mechanical triumphant race, "If that's the case, then I won't get any information from you. Tell me your name first. The order you received was not to leak information, right? Things like names can't be considered information. After all, it's not easy to address someone without a name." After pondering for a moment, the mechanical triumphant race spoke. Mechanical triumphant race serial number C207PR4F57T9. What I want is a name, don't you have a name? Wu Ming was even more helpless. Were the mechanical triumphant race really just machines? I don't understand. The mechanical triumphant race was silent. After a moment of silence, mechanical triumphant race spoke again. Question: what about Hublitis? Let's call her that for the time being. After all, this was the name she gave herself, so she would use it as such for the time being. Although it didn't look like a name at all. Then, Hublitis, as the price for not getting any information from you, you need to follow me. Do you agree? Wu Ming looked into Hublitis' eyes and said. Agreed, Hubrick said curtly. Then, let's see what we can get out of this giant dragon. Wu Ming looked at the giant dragon. Chapter 4:14. After that, Wu Ming gently woke up the dragon that was unable to move due to the broken bones in its body. Later, under the dragon's horrified expression, Wu Ming successfully gently extracted a lot of information. This world was called Dispode. It was a world where gods existed. These gods were called Old Deus. The energy of this world was not magic, but a kind of energy called spirit. That's right, it was the energy with life on Wu Ming's finger. Phantasma created by God. There were all kinds of phantasma, so there was no uniform appearance. Dragonia, created by God, had the appearance of a dragon. It had extremely high magic ability and magic resistance, and its physical fitness was also extremely strong. It could also use its past and future power in the present. It could be said to be an extremely powerful race. Gigant, created by the gods. As the name suggested, the giants were extremely tall and had extremely strong physical attributes. They were a powerful race that could compete with the dragon goblins. They had always been on good terms with the goblins. The Skywings, Flugel, were god-killing weapons created by God. They had extremely powerful strength that could kill god species. They looked like a group of humans with wings and had extremely long lifespans. They were currently living in the city formed by the fantasy breed of Bontiheim. They had built a city in the sky called Abontiheim. In addition, they were also a race with a strong thirst for knowledge. Because of this thirst for knowledge, they would collect all kinds of books. They once emptied all the books in the capital of Forest Elves. When it came to Skywing, they had to talk about the god who created them, the god of war Artesius. According to what Wu Ming learned from the dragon spirit seed, the god spirit seed Arthas was the most powerful god spirit among all the gods. According to gossip, these Skywing were actually created by Artesius to kill him, so he felt that he was too strong and no one could defeat him, so he created god of war Artesius to fight him. Wuming was quite interested in this god of war. The forest elves were created by the gods and created a large variety of magic. Their characteristic was their long ears. In terms of magic attainment, they could be said to be the strongest existence among all species. Goblins were created by the gods. They had dark skin and looked like the dwarves in the myths who forged weapons for the gods. Although their magical attainments were not as good as the forest goblins, they were not to be underestimated. Strictly speaking, the goblins' magical attainments were in the aspect of manufacturing. They were able to create magical tools and weapons. It was said that the goblins had even created a magic airship. The fairy race was created by God and could be said to be in existence similar to the forest elves. They had an extremely good relationship with the forest elves and were allies. Ex Machina, created by God, usually acted in groups. The Ex Machina were basically linked together, existing in the form of the internet. The Mechai species had super advanced calculation abilities. Through the Mechai species equipment and their own abilities, refracting the dragon breath of the dragon elite species was a piece of cake. Other than that, as long as they had been attacked once or seen a strategy, it would no longer be useful. Moreover, they could design the same weapon. In theory, they could be infinitely powerful. It was simply a bug. However, they could be said to be a group of people who would not attack others unless they were attacked. As long as no one provoked them, they would not provoke others for no reason. God knows what that dragon elite species did to provoke the Mechai species. The Demonia race was created by God. In simple terms, they were some demons that lived on the earth. The giant centipede that Wuming encountered before belonged to the Demonia race. Speaking of which, the god who created this race was really disgusting. Wuming thought of those tentacles and mucus again. The Damper race was created by God. In simple terms, they were life forms similar to vampires. They could not live without sucking blood. Lunamana, a race created by God on the huge red moon. By the way, there were 2 moons in this world and they existed both day and night. Rather than calling them moons, it would be more accurate to call them satellites that were extremely close to this planet and moved in the same orbit. The Werbeast race was created by God. They were basically beastmen. They did not have elves in their body and they could not use magic, but they had physical abilities that surpassed the limit. The Siren race was created by God. They could only live in the water and could not go ashore. They looked like mermaids. Because all of them were women, they needed men from other races to help them produce offspring. Because the Siren race had rich water essence in their body, a kind of elves, they had the ability to attract other elves, and having water essence in their body was equivalent to having a natural charm skill, so it was quite helpful for the Siren race to reproduce. In addition to these races, there was also a kind of intellectual creature, human beings. Human beings were not created by God. Not only did they not have elves in their body, they could not use magic, and they did not have excellent physical fitness like the orc race. It could be said that human beings were the weakest intellectual creatures. Therefore, human beings were not called human race by other races, they were simply called human beings. But that was not a big deal. Even if they were weak, they could still survive in this big family of many races. Just like in a fairy tale, the world created God, and God created various races, which made the world more colorful. It was originally like this. The gods and the various races they created lived peacefully in the world. Then, because of the selfish desires of their creators, several races went to war with each other under the command of their creators. The powerful gods, because they all wanted to be the only god, began an endless battle to compete for the throne of the only god. According to the dragon spirit, the war that affected the world has lasted for a year, and it was not very clear when it started. The races that went to war kept fighting, and the races that didn't want to go to war kept quiet. But according to the dragon spirit, those races that didn't want to go to war were killed by other gods, so they didn't go to war. After all, the races went to war because of the order of their creators. However, it was good to have one less enemy and other races didn't bother them. But only human beings, other races didn't pay attention to them, even if they were affected they wouldn't care. Even other races didn't regard human beings as a life form on the same level as themselves. Why was that? The dragon spirit said the reason. Because human beings were weak. Wuming also guessed that a race that was not created by God, had a short lifespan, had no elves in their body, couldn't use magic, had low physical fitness, and posed no threat. How could they be valued by other races? The weak had no right to speak, that was the cruelty of the world. Chapter 4:15. This is also why I heard that sigh. Wuming was relieved. How could he be willing to be looked down upon and trampled on like this? However, even so, humans continued to exist and survive in this world war that had lasted for tens of thousands of years. No matter how desperate or unfavorable it was, humans still continued to struggle at death's door. As expected, this is how humans should be. Wu-Ming walked on the road and smiled. Hubletus followed behind Wu-Ming obediently. Facing Wu-Ming's smile, Hubletus was very puzzled. I'm puzzled. Why is Nameless smiling so happily? The human race was clearly on the verge of collapse. Hubletus can't understand. By the way, Hubletus asked Wu-Ming for his name after he had a name, but we told him that he was just a nameless passerby and didn't need to remember. Therefore, Hubletus called Wu-Ming Nameless. This made no difference to Wu-Ming. After Wu-Ming heard Hubletus's question, he stopped and turned around. But even so, humans continue to live. Don't underestimate humans too much, Hubletus. Maybe at some point humans will do something unexpected. Hubletus tilted his head, still puzzled. Hubletus, I don't understand. Also, because Wu-Ming had asked Hubric to call himself by his name since he already had a name, he didn't need to call himself this machine anymore. Therefore, Hubric changed this machine to Hubric. However, Wu-Ming simply patted her head in the face of such a Hubric. You really don't understand now, but I'll think of a way to make you understand. Wu-Ming smiled. Even if he couldn't get information from Hubletus, Wu-Ming didn't let him go. Therefore, Wu-Ming had a plan to let Kekai gain feelings. It was clearly a life created by God, but it had no feelings whether it was taken away or not. This was the only thing that made Wu-Ming quite unhappy. Therefore, Wu-Ming set two small goals. He wanted to save the humans of this world and let Kekai have feelings. Then, does this have anything to do with what Ben Hubric is wearing? Hubric pointed at the clothes he was wearing. Wu-Ming took out a large hooded cloak that he had used for adventuring in the past from the Golden Ripples, modified it and put it on Hubletus. By the way, Wu-Ming was now wearing a hooded cloak that he once used for adventuring. Hubric is a Kekai species. Hubric doesn't need to wear clothes. He doesn't need to hide his identity when he's by John Doe's side. Why should he wear clothes? After saying that, Hubric tugged at his clothes again. As everyone knew, because of the Kekai species' consciousness and their mechanical bodies, the Kekai species basically didn't wear clothes. The only cover they wore was the armor that they would only wear in battle. Although they weren't as attractive as the human body. Cough cough. At least that's what Wu-Ming thought. No matter what, he wouldn't be in heat because of a blow-up doll. Moreover, Wu-Ming was going to let Hubric gain feelings. First of all, he had to let Hubric have a human sense of honor and disgrace. Most importantly, who the F***ck knew that Kekai species usually didn't wear clothes. Wu-Ming had already given up. After all, Hubric was still at the level of treating him as a tool. He couldn't rush it. Let's take it slow. Well, actually, my identity is very mysterious. In order not to expose me, I put you in disguise. Wu-Ming explained awkwardly. Yes, by the way, the Earth Dragon Spirit that Wu-Ming questioned had been healed and released by Wu-Ming. It would be great if the Earth Dragon Spirit didn't expose Wu-Ming's information, but it would be even better if he passed on the news of Wu-Ming to other races. He broke and even shattered all the bones of an adult Earth Dragon Spirit with one punch, and it was done with mercy. Wu-Ming estimated that if this news reached the ears of the god of war Artesius, he would probably be very excited. Because, even the Skywing species known as the god-killing weapon, needs everyone to work together to suppress an adult Earth Dragon Spirit like me. Even the person from the Skywing species had to risk his life to barely suppress an adult Earth Dragon Spirit like me, but you actually defeated me with one punch. Who the hell are you? These were the words of the extremely weak Earth Dragon Spirit at that time. To be honest, the Earth Dragon Spirit really had an advantage in this world. Resistance to magic, extremely strong magic abilities, the ability to gather the power of the future and the past for use in the present, and an extremely strong physical body. It could be said that a long time ago, in addition to the god species occupying the top position and the fantasy species being rare, the second most powerful race was the Earth Dragon Spirit. However, unfortunately, that could only be in the past. Now, the Earth Dragon Spirit was almost out of people. Hint, the Kekai species had once fought with the Dragon Essence species. In the end, all the members of the Dragon Essence species that participated in the battle were wiped out. Previously, when Wu-Ming was puzzled, Zayubric explained as such. Although Zayubric did not tell Wu-Ming the specific situation, Wu-Ming could almost guess it. The Earth Dragon Spirit had used the ability to copy the Earth Dragon Spirit's attack and attack the Earth Dragon Spirit, wiping out all the Earth Dragon spirit that participated in the battle. As a result, there weren't many dragon essence seeds left now. Coincidentally, the creator of the Earth Dragon spirit had died. As a result, the Earth Dragon spirit was at an even greater disadvantage. At that time, the Earth Dragon spirit had also looked at Zayubaruk with resentment. It seemed that the battle between the Earth Dragon spirit and the Earth Dragon spirit was not an accident. By the way, according to the Earth Dragon spirit, after witnessing the power of the Earth Dragon spirit, the various races had ordered that they were strictly prohibited from provoking the Earth Dragon spirit. Back to the topic, if the Earth Dragon spirit spread the news, although other races and even gods would be vigilant, it would pose a threat to the various gods and races. An unknown powerhouse comparable to the god species was wandering casually on the ground. Once this news spread, the other races would pay attention when they fought wantonly. If they accidentally provoked that unknown expert, it would definitely be a business that would only be a loss. So, where is Jianghu going? Zayubaruk asked. Of course, it's a place where there are humans, Wu Ming said without hesitation. Firstly, he would be able to observe and help the humans of this world. Secondly, if he wanted Zayubaruk to have human emotions, he would have to let her live in the human world. As for Wu Ming, he was just a non-human who understood humans very well. Then let's set a small goal first. Find the humans. With that said, two figures, one big and one small, wearing black cloaks, walked in a certain direction, moving forward unhurriedly. Chapter 4:16. Because Wu Ming did not deliberately search for traces of humans, Wu Ming and Zayubaruk slowly advanced on the ground. Along the way, because Wu Ming used a shielding spell, they did not encounter any trouble. They only encountered a few demons who were lucky enough to see Wu Ming and Zayubaruk. Then, these demons were treated as human beings by the Wu Ming cult. Wu Ming saw many people of other races. Because of the shielding spell, they did not discover Wu Ming and Zayubaruk. However, many times these hostile races did not attack. Instead, they were vigilant and left after a few words. It seemed like the dragon spirit had spread the news of Wu Ming, and now these races had restrained themselves a little. Wu Ming and Zayubaruk continued to search for traces of humans on the ground. Because the two of them did not need to eat, their speed was not slow. At this moment, Wu Ming and Zayubaruk arrived above a cliff canyon. There are elven skeletons everywhere. Wu Ming sighed as he looked at the tiny grayish-white objects floating in the sky like snow and the scene of the ground covered in snow. No wonder the ground was desolate. There were snowy mountains everywhere, and there were piles of skeletons that could destroy the bodies of creatures everywhere. It was not incomprehensible for the ground to be desolate. Moreover, these elven skeletons sometimes changed like the weather, like heavy snow and light snow. It was not surprising that the density of the skeletons would increase from time to time. Hint: Zayubaruk has the removal liquid to remove elven skeletons in his body. He is not afraid of these skeletons, Zayubaruk said as he stood behind Wu Ming with his hood on. Well, I'm not afraid. Wu Ming shrugged. These skeletons were still 20,000 years away from corroding the scales of a dragon of origin. There are a lot of elven reactions below. What do you think it is, Zayubaruk? Wu Ming asked with a smile, like a brother guessing a riddle for his sister. Hubaruk's eyes changed and data flowed through his eyes. Then Hubaruk spoke. A goblin's magic airship that crashed, Hubaruk said calmly. You're really unromantic. I didn't mean to ask you what's down there, Wu Ming said with a wry smile. Hubaruk doesn't understand. Hubaruk continued to tilt his head in confusion. Well, forget it. It's unrealistic to make you look like a human now. Wu Ming shrugged, then began to think about Zayubaruk's words. A gnome's magic airship that crashed? Wu Ming stroked his chin, considering if he should go and take a look. Question: Does Jianghu want to go down and take a look? Hubaruk said expressionlessly. Since it's a crashed magic airship, let's go down and take a look. After making the decision, Wu Ming and Hubaruk came to the bottom of the canyon in their own ways. As soon as they reached the bottom of the canyon, they saw a huge bronze airship. However, it was a dilapidated magic airship that was half destroyed. It looked like it had been there for some time. Visually, this airship was hundreds of meters long. It had to be said that the goblins were really interesting to be able to create such a huge aircraft. Wu Ming sized up this place and felt the increasingly rich elven bones. Wu Ming spoke. Let's go in first. After all, even if the elven bones couldn't cause harm to the two of them, no one would like to stay under threat. When it was drizzling, even if it didn't affect them much, who wouldn't want to use an umbrella if they had one? Of course, except for those who like to get wet. Then Hubert nodded faintly and followed Wu Ming in. But, did something occupy this place after the magic airship crashed? It's treating this place as its own nest. Wu Ming felt that there was a biological reaction inside this stronghold. There was no doubt that there was some creature in this airship. However, with Wu Ming's strength, there was no need to be afraid of those things unless the divine seed came. At this moment, Wu Ming stopped. Someone is coming, Wu Ming said. That's right, in Wu Ming's perception there were 3 humans. Hubert, you can use optical camouflage, right? Wu Ming asked. After all, this was a necessary ability for a robot. Confused? Optical camouflage? Hubert tilted his head and said doubtfully. That's the way, Wu Ming said and cast an invisibility spell on himself. Wu Ming's entire person disappeared. Understood, pseudo-reflex. Hubert said and activated a device on his body. Then Hubert also disappeared. Refracted the light through a reflective mirror? Wu Ming nodded. However, compared to Wu Ming's concealment, Hubert's position still had the elf. Simply put, it was the magic residue. Sure enough, simply refracting the light in this magical world is still a bit insufficient. With that said, Wu Ming waved his hand and eliminated Hubert's residual elf reaction. Stay aside, don't make any movements and don't make any noise, Wu Ming said. Although Wu Ming couldn't see Hubert's face, Hubert's voice came. Understood. Then the scene fell into silence. After a few minutes, 3 silhouettes quietly sneaked over from afar. Wu Ming had a good look at their appearances. They were wearing gray and brown hooded cloaks, scarves that served as masks, large goggles, tattered pants and brown boots. It could be said that there was not a single part of their bodies that was exposed to the outside world. Their clothes looked quite shabby, but Wu Ming was sure that they were indeed human. The 3 of them leaned against the wall of the magic airship and squatted down. How's the compass? One of the rough voices came from one of them, and the person who spoke was an uncle. After hearing the middle-aged man's question, one of the 3 who seemed to be the leader stretched out his hand from under the cloak. Even the hand that was hidden under the cloak was covered with gloves. It seemed like he was fully armed. He was holding a compass disc in his hand. The needle on the disc was constantly spinning, and it looked like it was broken. Sure enough, the compass is no longer useful because of the black ash. The leader frowned. Now we can only rely on our own eyes to find the enemy. Be careful, Ivan Ol, the leader called out their names. Yes. The 2 people behind the leader nodded heavily. The black ash is getting thicker. Hurry up. With that, the 3 of them sneaked into the magic airship. After the 3 of them entered the interior of the magic airship, Wu Ming and Hubert revealed themselves. Do you see that, Hubert? The humans are still trying to survive. Hubert didn't answer Wu Ming, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Let's go. There's a big guy here. Without us, I'm afraid they'll be at risk of being wiped out. Then Wu Ming and Hubert entered the magic airship and disappeared again. Chapter 417. Wu Ming didn't immediately follow the 3 humans. Instead, he took his time to tour the magic airship. Although the magic airship was damaged and most of the buildings in the airship had collapsed, it still couldn't hide the advanced nature of the magic airship. It couldn't hide the advanced technology of the goblins. Speaking of which, can your Kikai race also make a magic-guided airship like this? Silent Wonder asked Zayubalas. Answer. Through analysis and replication, the Kikai race can complete the creation of the magic airship. Data flowed through Hublitus's eyes as he answered Wu Ming. In other words, you have no way to innovate on your own? His footsteps didn't stop as he continued walking. The Kikai race will evolve according to the environment of the current era. Hublitus was silent for a moment, then said, I see. I'm interested in the god who created you. Wu Ming laughed. However, Wu Ming remembered that the dragon goblin had said that the creators of many races had disappeared. Some were killed by other gods and some disappeared for unknown reasons. After that, Wu Ming glanced at Hublitus. If the Kikai race were to exist, did their creator disappear on his own or was he killed by other gods? Wu Ming speculated that both outcomes were possible. Firstly, that god had such a powerful race. It was almost impossible for a god to kill that god. However, there was no one to command the Kikai race now. Therefore, Wu Ming felt that it was very likely that the god had disappeared on his own for unknown reasons. Secondly, the Mechai species had the ability to copy and reflect the enemy's attacks, which could be called a bug. The god who created them was likely to be attacked by the other gods. If the god was unscrupulous, the god who created them might still be killed by the other gods. That was why Wuming felt that both were possible. By the way, can you tell me who the god who created you was? Wuming asked. Although it involved some intelligence issues, it was still unknown whether he could get Hublitus to speak. What if he succeeded? According to the records in the database, the god who created us Kikai species is called Sail Tower. He disappeared 10,000 years ago. After hearing Wuming ask about the god who created him, Zayubaruk was silent for a moment before explaining to Wuming. Wuming looked at Hubaruk in surprise. Wuming didn't expect Hubaruk to speak. After all, this was a so-called secret. After that, Hubaruk really didn't say anything else. So Hubaruk only told me the name of the god who created them? He didn't expect to get any information anyway, so it didn't make a difference. At that moment, the magic airship started shaking violently. Wuming and Hubaruk stopped. Has that thing made a move? Wuming spread his magic power and sensed the direction of the three humans. They were a species that was quickly approaching them. Demon spawn. If they wandered in here, it was likely that they would be killed by the hidden dangers. Right now, the three of them were hiding in a cavern that had collapsed. They adjusted their breathing and tried their best not to be detected by the demons. The three of them had already realized that the enemy this time was the demons. The hearts of the three of them fell silent. Demons were existences that treated humans as food. The feeling of watching one's friends and family being eaten by demons with one's own eyes was simply maddening. But even so, Ivan, I order you to die here. Rick tried to be as cold as possible, but he still could not hide the sorrow in his words. It was already a routine. Among those who went out to collect information, once they encountered a similar danger, one of them must be sacrificed to help the others escape. And as the leader, Rick naturally could not be sacrificed. Oray was still of the younger generation, so Ivan, who already had a family and children, was the best choice. In an era where humans could not survive, once it was time to sacrifice, it would always be the older person who took this step. Take care of my daughter. Although he was ordered to die, Ivan still maintained a smile because his death was for his two compatriots to live. He died without regrets. Ivan? Oray, who did not go out to collect information, said somewhat unwillingly. But he also knew that in this situation, only Ivan's death was the most beneficial. But in the end, Oray still closed his mouth, clenched his teeth, and looked at Ivan with grief and indignation. Uncle Ivan smiled at the two and then rushed out. Demons? Come. Your food is here. Ivan shouted and ran toward the raw material room of the magic airship. From the beginning, they had already set the retreat route, including the route of the sacrifice. Ivan was ready to detonate the raw material room and die together with the demons. The tentacle-like demons did not know, and quickly wriggled in the gaps of the magic airship, crawling toward Ivan. And just as Ivan took out the detonation device and Rick and Oray were about to take the opportunity to leave, a voice came. What I hate the most is tentacles and mucus. Chapter 418. As soon as Wuming finished speaking, the demon's tentacles stopped as if it was stunned. Then, a blue transparent substance began to appear on the body of the giant demon. It was ice. In just a second, the demonic seed turned into a lifelike ice sculpture. This made Ivan, who was about to self-destruct, stunned as he stared blankly at the demon that was already very close to him. At such a close distance, Ivan could even feel the cold air coming from the ice sculpture. What's going on? Ivan asked in a trembling voice. Ivan, get out of there. There are people of other races here. At this time, Rieker shouted at Ivan and then ran toward Ivan with Oray. Ivan was reminded and immediately calmed down as he hurried to meet up with Rieker and Oray. The three of them were in a state of alert as they looked around. The reason why Rieker and Oray came back was because of the strength of the enemy. The enemy was a powerhouse who could instantly freeze the demon, so escaping was impossible. Therefore, Rieker and Oray chose to meet up with Ivan. Rieker, what do we do now? Oray gulped and asked nervously. Don't act rashly for now. Since the other party didn't choose to attack us but chose to attack the demon, it means that they are not hostile to us. Leader Rieker calmly analyzed. Although that was what he said, Rieker's hand was still on his dagger. After all, although the other party could be said to be Ivan's savior, but in this era, there were also people who first gave people hope and then gave people despair, so they must not be careless. Because in this era, carelessness meant death. It's all my fault, Rick. If I could have detonated it earlier, maybe you could have taken the opportunity to escape. Ivan said to Rick with some self-blame, still keeping his vigilant eyes on the surroundings. Don't say that, Ivan. Even if you detonated the material room and bought us time, don't forget that the other party can instantly freeze a demon of this size. If they really wanted to kill us, I don't think we could outrun such a powerhouse. Rieker said calmly as he continued to look around vigilantly. That's true, Ivan. Maybe the other party actually wants to save you so that we can leave safely. That way you can meet Nana. Oray's face was filled with joy and hope as he pretended to be calm and said to Ivan. By the way, Nong Na was Ivan's daughter. Wuming, who was hiding in the dark, was amused. He had to admit that a naive human like Oray could actually survive in this era. Even Wu Ming, after knowing the current information of this world, had already realized that this was a race war. Wu Ming still understood the principle that those who were not of his race would have different intentions. Not to mention, humans were a race that was ignored by other powerful races. Oray was truly naive to say such a thing. Don't be silly, Oray. Rieker scolded. The other party didn't do anything to us because we're still useful. No one would save us humans. You know that, right? Rick's words shamed Oray to the core. Oray understood that, but he still hoped that someone would come to save them. But, Rieker, didn't you think the same before? A god that can create humans? Oray's voice became softer and softer until he stopped talking. Humans don't have a god. We humans have to rely on ourselves. Rieker glanced at Oray and continued to look around vigilantly. Rieker, that person hasn't appeared yet. What's going on? Ivan voiced out his confusion. That's right. Ever since the demon was frozen, Rieker, Oray, and Ivan had met up and looked around vigilantly. Even now, that person still hadn't appeared. Now that you mention it, it seems that's true. Oray also realized that something was wrong after hearing Ivan's words. Rieker naturally noticed the problem, but Rieker thought that the other party was just putting on airs and putting on a show, so he didn't care. However, it had been so long, and the other party still hadn't appeared. That wasn't right. Did he leave? This thought popped up in Oray and Ivan's minds. As the leader, Rieker naturally understood what the two of them were thinking, so Rieker, Ivan, and Oray had the same idea. But, let's wait and see. We can't be careless. Although Rieker was confused, he didn't believe that the other party would leave just like that. He continued to be in a stalemate. No race would play with humans so excessively. Other races that saw humans as ants and mice, although there were times when they played with humans, it was impossible for them to take so long. It was the same logic as how a person couldn't play with 3 insects that were smaller than ants for an entire day. No exceptions. Hiding in the dark, Huberic looked at Wuming in confusion. Question: why don't you go down and meet them? Faced with Huberic's question, Wuming, who was deep in thought, came back to his senses. Why don't I go down and meet them? I was going to meet them, but I've changed my mind now. The reason why Wuming said that was because Rieker and the others were wary of non-humans. For a long time, the humans in this world had entered an unusually vigilant state because of their desire to survive. Listening to their conversation, it seemed that Rieker was a leader-like figure. As a leader, Rieker was more vigilant than ordinary humans. To put it simply, it was because humans had been oppressed and hurt for a long time, causing humans to be unusually nervous. As the leader of the entire race, Rieker shouldered a heavy burden that others couldn't imagine. Therefore, Rieker was more distrustful of other races than others and more vigilant. In that case, if I go up and say, I'm here to help you, it will definitely have the opposite effect, Wuming said bluntly. I don't understand. Then what should Nameless do next? Huberic asked. After thinking for a moment, Wuming looked at Rieker and the other two with a smile on his face. Since the other party is so vigilant, then I'll be a god and play with them. Huberic looked at Wuming's smile, tilted his head, and data flowed in his eyes. Nameless, my database shows that your current smile is called a bad taste. Oh, how can that be? Cough cough. You still don't understand the heart. You'll understand the true meaning of this smile after you understand the heart. Yes, that's right. Huberic nodded as if he understood. Next, it was time to show his acting skills. Chapter 419. Just as Rick was wondering if the other party had really left, a voice came from the void. Nice to meet you, human. This was Wuming changing his voice through magic. The entire space felt like it had fallen into a swamp, making the three of them feel quite heavy. The ancient and deep voice came into their ears. The three of them became even more alert. After hearing this voice, Oray and Ivan's body shook, which was a sign of excessive nervousness. Rick, on the other hand, was still in shock, looking around cautiously. Let me introduce myself. I am a god and I don't come from this world. Another world? Ivan and Oray looked at each other and exclaimed, Another world. Rick frowned. Regardless of whether the other party was lying or not, one thing was for sure, and that was the other party's information was unknown. Because he didn't know the other party's identity, he couldn't come up with a plan. I can only rely on the conversation to analyze. Rick thought in his heart. That's right, another world. For some reason I came to this world and met you by accident. The deep voice continued. Then, Lord Unknown God, why do you want to save us? Is it purely out of kindness? Rick asked. However, his question sounded like an interrogative question. Hey, Rick. Ivan and Oray looked at Rick nervously. Rick was supposed to be the most cautious one, but now he was the most reckless one. However, Rick did this for a reason. With his super advanced observation skills, Rick was able to glean some information from Wuming's words. This was a god who was not easily angered. Ha ha ha, as expected of the leader of the humans. Even if I said that I just wanted to help you, you wouldn't believe me. Wuming laughed. Ivan and Ol were stunned, while Rick's lips curled into a smile. That's right, I have a purpose. Wuming's words made Ivan and Oray's body tense up. After all, even if he was from another world, he was still a god. Leader of the humans, Rick, I want to make a bet with you. Rick frowned when he heard this. What bet? Rick asked bluntly. I'll bet on the possibility of being human. Rick felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His body trembled slightly and his pupils contracted. Possibility? Ivan and Oray, on the other hand, looked confused. Then, why are you betting on the possibility of humans with me? Rick asked in a heavy tone. In the world I live in, I am the guardian god who protects humanity. Do you understand? Wuming explained. Rick's pupils contracted again and then he smiled. Is it possible for humans? Although Wuming was wearing a mask, he could sense that Rick's smile contained a lot of meaning. Sadness, joy, excitement, dissatisfaction. Almost all positive and negative emotions were contained within. How about it? Do you want to bet? The bet is that the winner can order the loser once. Any kind of order. What do you think? Wuming continued asking. I'll bet with you. Rick answered Wuming with unprecedented enthusiasm. Haha, very good. Leader of the humans, Rick, I look forward to your actions. After that, the heavy pressure on the three disappeared. The god left. Hey Rick, is it really a good idea to make such a rash decision? Ivan and Oray looked at Rick worriedly. Although this unknown god gave off a harmless feeling, they should still be cautious. After all, Rick was their leader. If something were to happen to him, what would they do? Don't worry, I will win. Rick looked at Ivan and Oray. Ivan and Oray looked into Rick's eyes and were stunned. This pair of eyes contained an unprecedented light, filled with faith and hope. It was as if Rick had become a completely different person. By the way, what is the possibility of being human? Oray was completely confused. That guy is surprisingly emotional, Rick said, baffled. Huh? Ivan and Oray looked at each other, even more confused. Think about it, that guy is a god from another world who protects the humans, and the humans under his protection live a happy life. But when they come to this world, they find that the humans here are so weak. If it were you, what would you do, Oray? Ol, Rickety asked. If it were me, I would be very unhappy and would want to change the situation. It was like a certain country. The people of that country were living very well in their own country, but one day they went abroad and found that their countrymen were being targeted by others. Their lives were very miserable. Naturally, their first reaction would be very unhappy. That god is the same. He can't stand the humans being so depraved, so he wants to change the situation. The possibility of being human is the key. Ivan and Oray still didn't quite understand, but, well, it's all up to you, Rick. We don't understand this. Ivan looked helpless. That's right, that's right. As long as it's Rick, I believe you can win. Oray looked at Rick like a fanboy. Let's go, Ivan, Oray. Let's go realize our possibility. Oh. Then the three of them left. Wuming's Huberic's figure walked out from the side. I don't understand. The possibility of being human is not recorded in the database. Kubrick thought about this as he listened to the conversation between Wuming and Rick. When you have a heart, you will naturally know. You don't need to think about it. Wuming touched Kubrick's head and said casually. Kubrick nodded as if he didn't fully understand. Then Kubrick asked another question. Question nameless, is it God? Or is it acting? Kubrick tilted his head and looked at Wuming. You mean that? It's not completely acting. After all, I really did bless the humans and was worshipped as a god by them. Wuming thought of the Uruk people. But, compared to being a god, I prefer to be a traveler. The world is too big. It's impossible to finish walking, Wuming said with a smile. God, traveler, bless humans. Kubrick muttered the key words. No one knew what he was thinking. That human named Rick is very good. I'm going to give you to him and stay by his side. I believe you will understand the heart. Kubrick nodded again as if he understood. Then Wuming looked outside. Outside, the elven skeleton continued to deepen. 3 figures were moving quickly in a certain direction. The environment continued to deteriorate, but the possibility of being human was being excavated little by little. Do your best, humans. Chapter 420. Rick went back with hope in his heart. Wuming and Hublitus quietly followed behind Rick and the others. What a joke. It was not easy to meet humans. It would be a huge loss if they did not follow them to figure out where the humans gathered. It had to be said that Rick and the others were really cautious. Wuming discovered that the place where he met Rick and the others was very far from their base. This was probably also for survival. If they were targeted by other races and needed to be sacrificed, they would not expose the hiding places of other humans. They came to a cave and watched Rick and the others walk in. Wuming speculated that this might be their base. Find a place to hide. Don't run around. I'll go in and take a look, Wuming instructed Hublitus. Wuming got Hublitus to hide and wait for him. Then Wuming entered the cave in spirit form and followed Rick and the others. After all, spirit form was quite practical. Moreover, Wuming's current body was created by himself, so he could naturally add extra small abilities at will. Spirit form, which could only be used by spirits, was easily done by Wuming with the help of the power of the origin and Wuming's understanding of spirit form. After all, the origin was the origin of everything. The reason why he did not add other abilities was that they were not powers that Wuming was familiar with. Adding them was quite troublesome, and even if he added them, he would not be used to them. Moreover, even if those super powerful abilities were added to this body, they would not be much stronger. Even Wuming's original abilities had been weakened, let alone other abilities. Therefore, Wuming only added spirit form to his body, and everything else was the same as his original body. Inside the cave, there was a long tunnel without any light, except for the torches that Rick and the others were holding. The top of the torch was not a flame but a stone tied to it. This was a stone unique to this world. As long as it came into contact with water, the stone would absorb the water and emit light. It was very practical. The 3 of them each held a torch as they walked through the seemingly long tunnel. Rick, who was walking at the front of the cave, seemed to have sensed something. He instantly turned his head and looked at the tunnel behind him. What's wrong, Rick? Ivan and Oren, who were following behind Rick, didn't seem to want to answer. Rick took another long look into the dark tunnel. I'm fine. Let's go. He gradually landed behind Ivan and Oren, looking back from time to time. Gradually, the 3 of them went further and further away, leaving only the light of the torches. This is really surprising. Is it a sixth sense or is it just a simple sense of vigilance? Wuming's voice rang out calmly. Wuming was still in his spirit form. Wuming once again cast a large number of concealment spells on himself before he felt at ease and followed. Rick? Coming to the end of the tunnel, Wuming heard someone shout out these words excitedly. Wuming passed through the wall. Through his perception and eyes, Wuming saw the place where humans lived. This was a super wide natural underground cave, but there were also signs of artificial modification. Countless colorful glowing stones decorated this natural karst cave, and in some places there was even land, with some grains that Wuming did not recognize growing on it. All kinds of humans were busy. Some were managing the land with grains, some were managing the terraced fields, and some were collecting water through special means. The houses were built directly on the mountain, making use of the independent space of the karst caves. This was a simple room, and there was even a stable that was used as a means of transportation. The humans lived in an orderly manner, almost like a small society. At the spot where Rick and the other two were, there were people who took away their item backpacks. A rose-haired girl hugged Rick, looking very worried. "Daddy?" At this time, a young voice was heard. A purple-haired girl ran towards the three of them and rushed into the arms of the uncle named Ivan. "Oh, Nongna, did you listen to your big sister Crone?" Ivan hugged Nana lovingly and asked with a smile. Nongna is very obedient to big sister Crone. Nongna also knows how to write Nongna's name. Look, Nongna wrote it herself." Nana said as she picked up the unknown paper in her hand and showed it to Ivan. "Oh, Hahang, as expected of my daughter, you can write your own name. Daddy is proud of you." Ivan smiled from the bottom of his heart and stroked Nana's head. Nana laughed happily. Seeing this scene, Rick's heart was filled with uneasiness and shame. If it wasn't for the god who came in time, Nana probably wouldn't be able to see her father again. Rick lowered his head in self-blame. "Rick, what happened?" The rose-haired girl frowned as she looked at Rick, who had his head lowered. It seemed like a lot of things happened. "It's okay, Crone." Rick shook his head and looked at Crone with fighting spirit in his eyes. "Really, I told you to call me sister." "Well, forget it, being able to return safely is better than anything else. Welcome back, Rick." Crone looked at Rick with displeasure at first, then her expression relaxed and she smiled at Rick. "Yes, I'm back, Crone." Seeing this scene, Wuming nodded with satisfaction. Saving that human named Ivan wasn't in vain. Wuming in spirit form nodded with satisfaction. Then he didn't look at Rick and the others anymore. Instead, he left the place and went outside to meet up with Zayubaruk. On the top of a slightly higher mountain nearby, Wuming and Zayubaruk looked into the distance. "Hey Zayubaruk, I think you should enter the lives of these humans," Wuming said without turning his head. Answer: Zayubaruk has been abandoned by the Kikai race. How to deal with him is the power of the current owner of Zayubaruk, nameless, Zayubaruk said calmly. "Your words are quite ambiguous. I'm not your master. Remember, no one can be the master of others, not even you, the Kikai race, because you are a race that is about to have a heart. Understand? Can't." Data flowed in Zayubaruk's eyes as he stuttered this sentence. "Well, you won't understand even if I tell you now. When you have a heart, you will understand without a teacher." Wuming smiled as he stroked Zayubaruk's head. Wuming firmly believed that after living with humans for a period of time and with Wuming's guidance, Zayubaruk would be able to understand a heart and have feelings. Because letting machines have feelings was one of the possibilities for humans. Chapter 421. Because of his bet with Wuming, after a few days, Rick didn't continue to stay in the base. Instead, he chose to continue collecting information. Perhaps because he didn't want anyone else to die, Rick didn't bring anyone else with him this time. Instead, he rode a horse-like means of transportation raised by humans and took the first step to prove the possibility of humans. Wuming and Hublitus naturally followed after seeing Rick leave. "This is a great opportunity to send you into human life through Rick," Wuming said. Not only that, but Wuming was also curious about where Rick was going next. In this era where one could die if they weren't careful, it was impossible for humans like Rick to go out without prepared information. Flying in the sky, Wuming looked at the fully armed Rick with his superhuman vision, as well as the bags of food and water hanging from the beasts that functioned like horses. He easily deduced that Rick was going somewhere far away. A means of transportation for long-distance travel and at least 5 days of dry food and water. It didn't look like he was going for a casual stroll. Rick stopped moving forward and looked behind him vigilantly, making a puzzled sound. But it was obvious that he didn't find anything, so Rick continued on his way. "He's quite vigilant," Wuming said while flying in the sky and relying on the concealment technique. Wuming and Hublitus relied on the concealment technique to fly in the sky from the beginning. Not to mention Rick, even other races might not be able to discover Wuming and Hublitus who were concealed by Wuming's technique. It seemed that in this era not being vigilant would really lead to death. This time Wuming was extra careful. He and Hublitus flew at a higher altitude and followed behind Rick. After following Rick for almost half a day, Rick finally stopped changing his route and began to accelerate towards a certain place at full speed. Because the Earth had become the battlefield of various races, Rick kept changing his route. Perhaps it was because Rick had never been to his destination before, so he kept looking for the best route and marking it on the map. Wu-Ming asked Zayubarik as he watched Rick move in this direction at the fastest speed possible. Is there anything noteworthy in this direction? Wu-Ming asked out of curiosity. After all, Rick didn't seem to know how to change directions. Data flowed through Huberic's yellow eyes, which were like warning lines, before he opened his mouth to answer Wu-Ming. Answer: Zayubarik's database shows that ahead is the abandoned old capital of the Forest Elves, Maryland. Oh, Wu-Ming was intrigued. According to the intel, the Forest Elves and Goblins were sworn enemies, and Rick's destination this time was likely to be the former capital of the Forest Elves. In addition, Rick had found some good intel from the Goblins' crashed magic airship, so Wu-Ming felt that Rick's target was the former capital of the Forest Elves, Maryland. As the saying goes, the one who knows you best is your enemy, so it was normal to have information about your sworn enemy. Therefore, Wu-Ming wasn't surprised that Rick had found information about the Forest Elves from the Goblins' crashed magic airship. I'm slightly interested in that place. Wu-Ming's lips curled up. After all, even if it was an abandoned old capital, it was still the glory of the Forest Elves. It was like a gorgeous ruin that hid secrets. Let's go take a look in advance, Zayubarik. What do you think? Wu-Ming asked Zayubarik. Answer: Zayubarik doesn't care. Everything will be decided by John Doe, Zayubarik said calmly. That won't do, Zayubarik. You have to learn how to think and ask questions. It's because humans know how to think that they can survive the war with other races. This is the prerequisite for you to obtain a heart, Zayubarik, Wu-Ming said to Zayubarik as he shook his head calmly. After Zayubarik heard Wu-Ming's words, the data in his eyes flowed again. After a few seconds, Zayubarik nodded. Understood, Zayubarik. I understand. Zayubarik nodded. Then what do you think about us going to take a look first? Wu-Ming repeated his question. I agree. Zayubarik isn't interested in the former capital of the Forest Elves. However, since John Doe wants to go, Zayubarik will accompany him. Zayubarik looked into Wu-Ming's eyes and said seriously. Although Zayubarik seemed to be a little dependent on Wu-Ming, Wu-Ming felt that Zayubarik's current state was already very good. Then let's go take a look first. Please lead the way for me. Wu-Ming looked at Zayubarik with a smile. Zayubarik looked at Wu-Ming's smile and nodded. Then 2 meteors streaked across the sky. Because of the increase in altitude, Rick didn't notice that something was wrong and continued to move forward at full speed. However, even if Rick was riding a vehicle, it was still too slow for Wu-Ming and Zayubarik. About 10 seconds later, Wu-Ming saw a dilapidated city. Wu-Ming and Zayubarik landed in front of the old capital of the Forest Elves, Merlin, and walked in through the gap. It was attacked, right? No wonder it was abandoned. Wu-Ming looked at the traces of destruction inside Merlin. It was obviously not the power of nature but man-made. Answer: according to the records in the database, this place was attacked by the Skywing species, Zayubarik said calmly as he followed behind Wu-Ming. Skywing species? No wonder it was destroyed like this, Wu-Ming said knowingly. It could be said that the buildings in Merlin were basically destroyed and there was no complete building at all. I'm afraid Rick will be very disappointed if he comes. After all, there was no doubt that Rick's purpose was to search for information, and it was unlikely that there would be any information in Merlin that had been destroyed, unless the Forest Elves used magic to protect the information. Then Wu-Ming saw a complete sea of flowers filled with elves. There was no doubt that this place was protected by the Forest Elves' magic. There really is a place protected by magic. Wu-Ming and Zayubarik walked over. Places protected by magic are usually the Forest Elves' treasure troves, laboratories and other valuable places. Zayubarik explained to Wu-Ming as he followed Wu-Ming to the center of the flower bed. Are you saying that we've caught a big fish? Wu-Ming's lips curled into a smile. Then Wu-Ming used magic to open the door on the floor. Want to take a look together, Zayubarik? The reason why Wu-Ming sent an invitation to Huberich was because there might be a trap below, which represented danger. Agreed. Zayubarik will work with John Doe. Then Wu-Ming and Zayubarik walked down the exposed stairs and went underground. The laboratory-like scene entered Wu-Ming's eyes. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.